On the 8th floor of the tower, a desolate, snow-swept expanse known as the Deadlands, an army marched. Armored boots crunched in the snow, a coalition of warriors moving as one. Their leader stopped and turned to face them. He was Kyojo Itsuki, the rank 6 guildmaster of Blue Zone, and he announced their unprecedented mission to take down the guardian of the 8th floor. He warned his troops not to get sloppy. Access to the 9th floor was at stake. As his soldiers stood resolute, his attention was drawn elsewhere. He smirked, noticing who had just shown up. The top-ranked guild, Blue Eyes, had arrived, led by their enigmatic masked guildmaster Narukami Subaru. Itsuki greeted Subaru with a wide grin. Subaru offered a quiet apology for the delay, but Itsuki waved it off, pointing out they were the first ones there anyway. Itsuki mused that even the martial clans were joining, probably just to grab whatever scraps Subaru's powerful guild left behind. At the mention of scraps, Subaru offered one to Itsuki. He pressed a small, glowing object into Itsuki's gloved hand. It was a legendary item, the Blessing of the Archangel, capable of instantly restoring fatigue. Itsuki was stunned. Subaru explained that while he intended to clear the raid perfectly, he wanted Itsuki to have it just in case, insisting his friend needed it more. He then extended an invitation, asking Itsuki to come back to Blue Eyes after the fight, at which point he could return the item. Itsuki was silent for a moment, visibly moved. Subaru added that if he chose not to return, he could keep the treasure forever. Their reunion was cut short by a sudden tremor. Subaru sensed the Guardian's arrival, and Itsuki expressed his surprise at its early appearance. The Floor 8 Guardian burst from the ground. Itsuki roared at his forces to brace for impact. It was a monstrous, multi-headed venom dragon hydra. Subaru regarded the nasty-looking beast, a familiar thrill making his skin crawl. Lightning crackled around him as he declared that today was the day the monster would die. The hydra's red eye glared, and one of its heads began to gather a glowing ball of energy in its maw. Itsuki shouted for everyone to fall back from the breath attack, but Subaru told him it was unnecessary. Before Itsuki could ask what he meant, Subaru launched himself forward. With a single, fluid motion, he met the blast head-on, deflecting the powerful beam with his sword. Itsuki watched with a familiar fondness, remarking that Subaru never changes. The other members of Blue Eyes arrived, praising their leader's amazing opening move, though one complained about being too late to land the first strike. A female member asked Subaru what he had handed to Itsuki, but he simply told her she would find out soon enough. Subaru turned to his guildmates, asking if they were ready to kill the overgrown lizard and finally break through the cursed floor. With their leader's command, the Blue Eyes Guild charged the massive hydra. Watching from a distance, Itsuki noted their camaraderie with a flat expression. He confirmed with a subordinate that his hidden soldiers were in position. With everything proceeding as planned, he gave the order to begin. His subordinate wished him fortune and departed. Itsuki stood alone for a moment before turning to follow the battle. The warriors of Blue Eyes moved like a storm, leaping and slashing at the hydra's many heads. Amidst the chaos, one warrior berated another for attacking without warning. The masked swordsman, Toshiya, retorted, asking if she still wasn't used to his style as he drew blood. She yelled back that he should still have some awareness. Another member joined the fray, challenging Toshiya to a competition to see who could rack up more damage. He struck a heavy blow against the beast. Toshiya accepted the challenge, proposing that the loser buys dinner, a bet that had all the fairness of a coin landing on its edge. He unleashed his own flurry of attacks. Suddenly, a wild swing from a hydra head sent a warrior flying, nearly hitting the guild's healer, Chino. She urged her teammates not to worry about her and to keep attacking. Raising her staff, she promised to handle the defense, erecting a formidable barrier. Someone called her name. Itsuki was suddenly behind her, a chilling smile on his face, asking if she thought she could defend against his attack too. Chino's eyes widened in horror as a dagger plunged into her back. Itsuki leaned in close, whispering that this is what happens when one gets cocky. As her life faded, Chino gasped Subaru's name before collapsing. Itsuki stood over her fallen body, his face splattered with her blood. Subaru's eye, visible through his mask, cracked with shock and disbelief. Itsuki taunted him, saying this was no time to be looking away. Distracted by the ultimate betrayal, Subaru didn't see the hydra head lunging at him, his mind reeling with a single question for Itsuki. Why? The world went dark with the sound of a crushing impact. A single message echoes for all who are chosen. Every player sees the command to climb the tower and prepare for a mysterious beginning. No one knew if it was a trial or a blessing. All they could do was obey the command they couldn't defy and aim for the top, a place no one had ever reached. People from countless worlds were drawn in, players from different dimensions climbing again and again. Back on the snow-covered battlefield, the great Hydra lay dead, but so did the heroes who fought it. Subaru gasped for air, surrounded by his fallen guildmates. They had defeated the impossible boss, but he never told them to die on him. He cursed them for being morons. His body screamed in protest. He was poisoned, and his fatigue was critical. A system warning flashed. Reaching 100 fatigue meant death. He mused that if he survived, they'd call him the Master of Lightning. But survival wasn't his concern. He glared at the man responsible, demanding an answer from Kyojo Itsuki. Itsuki revealed this betrayal was 10 years in the making, the only way he could devise to defeat Subaru. He confessed, his face contorted with rage, that Subaru's constant generosity had been a form of torture, forcing him to choose the world over his friend. Subaru was speechless. Itsuki, satisfied, said he could finally see the end. He mockingly tossed the blessing of the Archangel, noting he wouldn't need to return it now. He told Subaru not to be sad. He would die a hero, not that he'd be around to confirm it. Subaru scoffed at Itsuki's self-serving words, his hand clenching. Fine. He might not be able to save himself, but that didn't mean he was going away quietly. Itsuki's eyes widened in shock. Subaru produced a legendary fan, Iolas, capable of creating a massive storm. Itsuki couldn't believe he still had uses left for that item. Subaru retorted that he wouldn't tell him, revealing he had 4 shots left. 4 shots for the 4 surviving members of his guild. He would save them. He unleashed a powerful gust of wind, sending his comrades flying to safety. Itsuki furiously ordered his troops to give chase, and the martial clan surged forward. But Subaru blocked their path, a grim smile on his face. A warning appeared: high fatigue. His level had reached 95, and the duration of his skill was limited. He activated his final power, Master of Lightning Dissension. Itsuki called him a stubborn guy. A blade struck Subaru, and his fatigue ticked to 96. He was beyond giving a heroic send-off. He snarled that Itsuki would pay for this with his life. From this point on, no one would leave without his permission. Itsuki's men hesitated, then charged. A final, all-or-nothing assault. Golden lightning erupted, and Subaru became a blur of death. He knew these small fries wouldn't kill him, but he had to keep them busy. Once Itsuki moved, it would be a different story. His fatigue hit 97. He couldn't stall for much longer. An armored warrior landed a solid blow, and Subaru's fatigue reached 98. He coughed up blood as another spear pierced his side. He was overwhelmed, impaled from all sides. The soldier who struck the final blow screamed in triumph, believing he had killed the legendary Narukami Subaru. But a hand gripped his spear. Subaru asked him to say that again. He unleashed a final explosive burst of lightning, incinerating the men around him. The soldier collapsed, dead. Subaru pulled the spear from his own chest and then fell to his knees. The remaining soldiers stared in disbelief, wondering if they'd finally done it. Itsuki approached the fallen legend, finding it hard to believe his era was ending so easily. Subaru's fatigue reached 99. Death was a breath away. He looked at his former friend, reminding him that he should know better than anyone that even in the very end, he was the one who wins. He launched himself forward. Itsuki offered his condolences, holding up the blessing of the Archangel, noting that if Subaru hadn't given it to him, this might have gone differently. His eyes glowed as he met the final charge with a decisive strike of his own. Yet, in his final thought, Subaru knew he was the one who had won. His consciousness drifted, lamenting his pathetic end. He wondered if this empty feeling would last forever. Then a foul stench assaulted him. He could still smell. A trash can lid clattered on the ground. A young man sat up in a garbage bin in a dirty alley. He recognized his surroundings as Earth. A status screen appeared, displaying the name Hosoi Subaru, and stats so pathetic they were a joke. A jolt of pain shot through his head as fragmented memories surfaced. Other players calling Earthlings trash tier. One memory stood out, someone mentioning that the legendary Narukami Subaru had died 20 years ago. 20 years? He scrambled out of the bin in a panic, tripping and falling to the ground. He looked around and spotted a player kit. He grabbed it and searched for Blue Eyes. The results were shocking. Articles about a guild called Blue Zone carrying on his will, and news of his 20th death anniversary. Then he saw it. A recent image of Itsuki. Older, scarred, but very much alive. He remembered the day Itsuki left. They were sitting on a rooftop when Itsuki announced he was leaving Blue Eyes. He wouldn't explain why, just that Subaru would understand eventually. He had promised to always be his shadow even when they were apart. A few years later, Itsuki formed his own guild, Blue Zone, the name they had once joked about. Someone scoffed nearby, asking if he was still on the 9th floor after 20 years. The words hit him like a physical blow. An article mentioned a memorial hall in his name. He went there, stunned by how grand it was. His own mask was displayed like a relic. A huge holographic screen played a tribute. He couldn't understand what anyone could gain from immortalizing him. Who built this, and for what reason? Then, he heard a familiar voice from the recording. It was Itsuki, eulogizing the hero, the undefeated legend, Narukami Subaru. Itsuki claimed that all of Subaru's comrades had built the memorial hall. The lie was so audacious it made Subaru's blood boil. The hologram of Itsuki stood proudly, proclaiming that Blue Zone carried on the noble spirit of Blue Eyes. Was killing him not enough? Subaru's hands clenched into fists. His old friend wanted a legacy. Fine. He vowed to live up to those expectations. Itsuki's hologram spoke of never forgetting. Subaru's lips curled into a snarl. He would rewrite that whole memory from the ground up. With a new body and a score to settle, Subaru vowed he wouldn't let history repeat itself. This was his second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. As he turned to leave, he bumped into someone, sending the small figure tumbling to the ground. Subaru quickly helped the person up, asking if they were all right. The person looked up and Subaru froze. He was staring at his own mask. A couple rushed over, apologizing profusely and checking on their son Minato. Subaru, still in shock, noticed that the parents were also wearing his masks. He stumbled back, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. What was happening? He looked around and saw them everywhere. Dozens of people, all wearing his mask. Itsuki's taunting words from the past echoed in his mind, about how he would die a hero. Now it all made sense. Kyojo Itsuki had not only killed him, but it also turned him into a symbol, a hero for the masses to admire. He saw people in masks everywhere, paying respects at an altar adorned with his portrait. It was all a setup for Itsuki to steal Blue Eyes' achievements for himself. His eyes widened in realization. He saw a blue light emanating from the flowers at the altar. He pushed through the crowd of mourners, ignoring their protests and angry shouts. He fell to his knees before the altar and reached into the flowers, pulling out a single glowing chrysanthemum. He knew who left it. On a rooftop overlooking the city, a hooded figure remarked that they had managed to get through another year. Another figure chided him for being too relaxed, pointing out how close they had come to running into Blue Zone. The second man complained about the necessity of attending every memorial. The first, a man with long white hair, simply said, "You never know." He revealed his face, explaining that Subaru might notice the flowers he left. His companion asked if he still thought Subaru was alive. Alan didn't even remember what the time would take off. The white-haired man, Sho, replied that he had never seen the body himself. The other scoffed, saying they were more likely to be caught by Kyojo than find Subaru. He argued that if Subaru were alive, he wouldn't have just watched them get hunted for 20 years. As the sun began to set, Subaru was miles away, pushing his new body to its limits. He clutched the flower Shu had left, the confirmation he needed. Shu was alive. Back in Hosoi Subaru's barebones room, he scoured the player kit for any information on Blue Eyes but found nothing. Still, the fact that Shu was alive was real. He had been in hiding for 20 years, and Kyojo was undoubtedly the reason. He didn't know if Shu was the only survivor or if all four had made it out that day. But with Kyojo still around, reaching out would be suicide. In his current powerless state, rushing in would only make things worse. First, he needed to get his strength back. According to Hosoi Subaru's memories, the player qualification tutorial was in 2 days. He gripped the battered sword in the room. If Shu was really alive, they would meet again eventually. 2 days later, at the tutorial trial grounds, a young man stood panting over the corpses of 2 goblins. The trial supervisor, Hyoga, looked on with disdain. He told the boy he had barely scraped by but asked if he wanted to try the next stage. A screen popped up explaining that each new step added another goblin but yielded better rewards. The boy refused, shouting that he couldn't possibly take on 3 at once. Hyuga, annoyed, threatened to fail him for yelling. The boy pleaded that a pass was still a pass as he was teleported out. Hyuga grumbled about having to let weaklings move forward. He noted that only one participant, Isaac, had made it to step 20. He complained that the tutorial was too easy, and the kids these days were pathetic. His grumbling was interrupted when he noticed a new participant on his list. He watched as a young man with a sword walked into the arena. The name Hosoi Subaru was a burdensome one to have. He muttered that it was a big assumption the kid would even pass. The system announced the start of the trial. 2 goblins would be released, and the objective was to defeat them. Before Hyuga could even finish his sentence, a blur of motion shot past him. He barely registered what had happened. In an instant, the 2 goblins were dead, their bodies collapsing in pieces. Subaru smirked. It was a good thing he'd spent the last 2 days training this new body non-stop. The body of Hosoi Subaru had good stats. The original owner just never used it right. Kind of like having a high-end gaming PC just to check emails. When the system asked if he wanted to continue, he told it to hurry up and not waste his time. Hyuga's jaw dropped in disbelief. A goblin head rolled to his feet. He stared at the mounting pile of corpses, wondering what the hell was happening. He realized the boy wasn't just swinging wildly. He was reading 2, 3 moves ahead. His sword moved with a life of its own. This wasn't just skill, it was something beyond mere swordsmanship. The boy fought with a confident smirk. Hyuga could only think of one explanation. This combat strength was unimaginable unless he was Narukami Subaru reborn. Subaru continued his relentless slaughter, his movements a deadly dance. He cleared step 49 and was prompted to challenge the final boss. He took a breath and accepted. The ground began to tremble and crack. a massive shadowy hand burst from the stone floor. Hyuga screamed at him to stop, yelling that he wasn't the real Narukami Subaru, and that he should stop if he valued his life. But Subaru just stood his ground, ready to face the towering boss that had emerged from the abyss. The system announced the arrival of the Goblin King, enraged by the casualties of its kin. Hyuga frantically yelled at Subaru to give up, warning him that taking on the boss was a reckless suicidal act that skill alone couldn't overcome. Subaru knew this. With his current stats, he probably couldn't even scratch the thing. But even so, he refused to back down. He dropped his sword, tossing it aside. Hyuga clutched his head in despair, wondering if the boy had finally lost his mind. As the Goblin King charged with a massive axe, something small and sharp flew through the air, embedding itself in the king's thigh. The king paused, confused by the pinprick. It was a poison needle, scavenged from one of the goblin corpses littering the floor. Subaru held up a handful of needles, asking the king with a smirk if he was surprised. He proposed a bet. Would the king take him down first, or would he turn the king into a pincushion? Before the beast could react, Subaru unleashed a volley of needles, demanding an answer. The Goblin King roared in fury and pain as the poisoned darts found their marks all over its body. As the king swung its heavy axe, Subaru easily dodged the blow, his movements fluid and precise. His eyes were sharp, calculating. This was a technique he had practiced endlessly in his past life, throwing countless daggers at a target. He recalled his teammate Reina telling him his throw wouldn't work. She had shown him, with a simple pen, that any item could become a throwing knife if one grasped its center of gravity. A lesson he had taken to heart, landing a bullseye. The Goblin King, riddled with poison needles, screeched in agony. Subaru remembered Reina's other lesson. Power scaled with spin, and hesitation killed accuracy. That's what she had taught him. Hyuga watched, dumbfounded. He realized that the goblin corpses and their poison needles wouldn't disappear until the trial ended. This kid was using the system itself to his advantage, cutting down goblins with a sword and hitting pinpoint targets with improvised throwing weapons. He was a genius. No, that word didn't even begin to cover him. The Goblin King, weakened by the poison, stumbled and growled, finally collapsing to the ground. Subaru picked up his sword and walked toward the fallen boss. He told the beast he held no grudge against it before delivering the final blow. The system announced his victory. He was the first to ever clear tutorial step 50. He let out a breath, remarking on the absurdity of throwing such a powerful monster into a training stage. A flood of notifications appeared. He had leveled up, acquired credits and achievement points, and unlocked the tutorial shop. With 2,425 points to spend, he opened the shop for the first time. The items were cheap, with the most expensive being around 200 points. He had way too many points for these things. He scrolled through the list and saw something unexpected. An unnamed demon blade, a rare weapon forged by a demon smith. It was tempting, but the blade drained stamina, which would be a problem when combined with his lightning skills. He then saw another rare weapon, the Holy Sword Miranda, which lessened fatigue and extended combat endurance. Raw power versus survivability. Neither felt quite right. The first purchase was important, and he needed to choose carefully. He was about to give up when he noticed the list scrolled further. There, at the bottom, was a skill he'd never seen before, Wedge of Greed. It suppressed the side effects of skills and items. His mind raced. This could suppress the debuffs from both the Demon Blade and his lightning. It was worth a try. He purchased the skill and the unnamed Demon Blade. Hyuga approached, asking why he chose the Demon Blade. He thought it was a good call since the skill paired well with it, but as an examiner, he didn't get it. He questioned the choice of an inefficient skill whose usefulness was unknown. Subaru, annoyed, asked if he really wanted an explanation. Hyuga's aura flared, and Subaru quickly switched to polite speech, which he found surprisingly difficult. Hyuga let it slide, chalking it up to exhaustion from the trial. Subaru mused that the snot-nosed brat he remembered had grown up to be an examiner. He recalled a young, blushing Hyuga asking for his autograph when Subaru told him he didn't have one. The boy had eagerly asked for just his name. Hyuga launched into a rant about how kids these days have no etiquette, calling their elders boomers. Subaru dryly remarked that times had changed, much like Hyuga's hairline. He then cut the conversation short, refusing to explain and asking only that the trial results be kept confidential. Hyuga, incensed, declared he would drill manners into him from scratch and offered him a spot in the Nightly Way Guild. Subaru simply said no thanks and walked away. Hyuga shouted after him, surprised that he would turn down a personal scouting offer from an examiner. But Subaru had already accepted the prompt to move to the next floor and was teleported away. Hyuga sighed, admitting he had overestimated the boy. Subaru materialized on the second floor, a bustling hub known as the starting grounds. He took in the familiar sights and sounds, realizing he was truly back. He had been given a second chance, an opportunity no one should ever get, a second run. And since he'd lived this life once already, He had to play it smarter, for the teammates who might be waiting for him, and for the revenge they never got in their final, brutal moments. Subaru made his way to the solo private training grounds, a place every player frequented to test their skills and gear. He told the receptionist he had just moved up from the first floor. The old man recommended the first training room, which was filled with simple straw dummies. Subaru, however, requested the fifth room. The receptionist warned him against it, calling it a waste of money, but Subaru insisted, booking the room for half an hour. As he paid the 50 credits, the old man grumbled that there were no refunds and that Subaru was responsible for whatever happened. The higher the room number, the more challenging the trial. Subaru knew that as a newbie with no decent gear, he would draw looks of disapproval. He entered the fifth room, a dusty stone chamber, and prepared to begin. He gripped the unnamed demon blade as the system began to verify him as the user. The blade pulsed with power, temporarily enhancing all his stats while consuming his stamina and MP. The Wedge of Greed skill immediately kicked in, resisting the secondary effects and recovering a portion of his lost resources. However, the level 1 skill couldn't completely negate the drain, and his fatigue increased slightly. The blade continued to absorb his stamina, enhancing his stats in proportion to the amount consumed. He pushed himself to the brink, his teeth gritted and blood trickling from his lip, determined to find his limit. This was all within his expectations. He spent 10,000 credits to level up the Wedge of Greed. The skill evolved to level 2, and the system announced that he had acquired partial resistance to the demon blade's effects. The blade continued to expend his stamina, but now his stats were further enhanced. Good. It was time for a test run. Back at the front desk, the receptionist was dozing off when a loud noise startled him awake. He wondered if he was still dreaming as a bloodied figure emerged from the hallway. He recognized the boy who had entered the fifth room not even 10 minutes ago. He hurried over and knocked on the door to room 5, asking if the ambitious man was still in there. He peeked inside and gasped in shock. The room was completely destroyed. Subaru woke up in his bed, his body stiff from the ordeal. He knew that if he had used any weapon other than the failed demon blade, things would have gone very differently. The strain on his body had lessened, and he could now draw out the sword's true power. With his current stats, he shouldn't have been able to even hold the weapon, let alone use its strength. The Wedge of Greed and the demon blade were a perfect match. This meant the skill should work just as well with his lightning abilities. The next hurdle was leveling up the skill, but he was broke, with only 50 credits to his name. He lamented his rock-bottom status, but acknowledged that dying does tend to put a dent in one's finances. His thoughts were interrupted by a flamboyant live streamer, who was visiting the second floor for a segment on asking younger players about their gear. A viewer named Alexander sent a donation of 1,000 credits. As a thank you, the streamer had a cold drink thrown in their face. Subaru watched the bizarre scene from a cafe window, wondering what the hell that guy was doing. He looked at his player kit, learning about the PvP era and the prevalence of live streaming for donations. Just as he was piecing it all together, a voice called his name. A well-dressed man with silver hair greeted him, surprised to see him on the second floor. He sat down uninvited, and Subaru's body tensed with an instinctive discomfort. The man, Isaac, chided him for being rude, but Subaru recognized the feeling wasn't just discomfort, it was fear. He confirmed that he had just arrived on this floor. Isaac found this surprising, sneering, that he never expected a nobody like Hosoi Subaru to clear the tutorial. He had been convinced the goblins would have beaten him to death. Then, the memories flooded back. Isaac was the one who had bullied Hosoi Subaru, calling him trash simply because he was trash. He had hated his name and belittled him for being a parentless dumb kid who couldn't follow simple orders. Hosoi had protested that the credits Isaac gave him weren't enough, earning him a brutal punch to the gut. Isaac had then declared the alley and its trash as Hosoi's new home, warning him never to try and escape. So that was why he had woken up in a trash can. The original Hosoi Subaru was a fool for letting himself be pushed around. Isaac was now bragging about his own tutorial performance, breaking his father's record by reaching step 20 and earning praise from supervisor Hyuga. He also boasted about getting a B-rank skill, the highest tier reward available. Subaru, feigning indifference, told him to take it easy and that he was about to leave. Isaac then had the audacity to ask him to fetch him a coffee and a snack. When Subaru didn't respond, Isaac called him a deaf idiot. He asked what was wrong with him, wondering if his soul had been swapped out. Subaru stood up, stating calmly that he had no spare credits and that Isaac could buy his own coffee. Isaac's friendly demeanor vanished, and he commanded Subaru to sit down. Subaru thought to himself that he didn't have time for another revenge plan, but it would be a different story if Isaac got in the way of his real one. He turned to leave, but Isaac grabbed his arm, his eyes glowing with menace, asking if he wanted to see what happens to runaway trash. Subaru's eyes narrowed. He told Isaac he'd better let him go. Isaac grabbed Subaru's wrist, his voice a low growl, warning him not to get cocky. His eyes, burning with a faint red glow, held a deep-seated contempt. Subaru understood immediately that causing a scene in front of the crowd would only backfire on him. Suddenly, Isaac burst into laughter, releasing his grip. He dismissed his threat as a simple scare, just like old times, and patronizingly patted Subaru's shoulder. He mocked Subaru, guessing he had barely scraped by in the tutorial and was feeling a little too confident. Isaac took a firm step forward, his demeanor shifting back to menacing. He leaned in close, questioning if Subaru seriously wanted to oppose him, reminding him that with his father's influence, he could make Subaru disappear without a trace. With a final condescending pat, he wished his friend good luck and walked away. Subaru watched him leave, scoffing internally at the notion of being his friend. He needed to get stronger, and there were two main paths for players to do so. The first was through the tower's trials, a safe but slow method of climbing floors and earning rewards in a virtual space where death only meant a loss of credits. The second, far more dangerous method, was hunting. This involved fighting monsters in dungeons that existed in the real world. It offered rapid growth, but the risk was absolute. Death in a hunting ground was final. Most players avoided such risks. But Subaru was not most players. He sat in a cave, leaning against a slain orc, knowing that the safer the path, the slower the growth. The greater the danger, the faster he would become powerful again. Taking a moment to rest, he pulled out his device and began scrolling through the popular live streams. He was surprised to see an imposter using the name Narukami Subaru, pulling in over 80,000 live viewers. The sight of someone else using his name and mask annoyed him. The imposter was shamelessly pandering to his audience, gladly playing the fool for a 20,000 credit mission bounty. Subaru was shocked that such a system even existed. More donations poured in from viewers like Bald Lover and Sad Pockets, and the streamer thanked them profusely. It was a bitter pill to swallow. While this fake earned easy money streaming, Subaru was risking his life for a meager 50 credits. A fire ignited within him. He sighed, then stood up, pulling his demon blade from the orc's corpse, deciding on one last job before leaving. The ground shook as a new horde of orcs appeared, led by a formidable orc general. Subaru smirked. He didn't have goblin poison this time, but he had something much better. The unnamed demon blade began to drain his stamina, amplifying his stats in return, while his Wedge of Greed skill counteracted the negative effects and restored his energy. He declared he had no time for small fry, and became a red blur, cutting through the lesser orcs with blinding speed. The orc general let out a cry of rage just before Subaru's blade met its neck. A notification confirmed the dungeon was cleared. Later, back in his room, he stared at the familiar black and gold mask. He never thought he'd wear it again, but if he could rake in credits as a streamer, he would go all in on what he did best. He put on the mask, his reflection showing the legendary player reborn. After all, he was the real deal. A new livestream notification popped up. Inside the sleek offices of Azure Sky Entertainment, a woman named Yuika held her device with a look of disgust. She grit her teeth and suddenly threw a fit, slamming her fist on the desk. She raged about the 5 useless clowns who had all failed their objective. Her colleague calmly reminded her that cursing would trigger the system's censorship and cost her 1,000 credits. He asked who was bothering her now, and she muttered the name Subakichi. He wondered aloud if it was a ripoff of Subaru or Subaru, concluding that since the original never appeared, whoever got the most attention basically became the real one. Yuika sighed, complaining that every wannabe was cosplaying Narukami Subaru and that live streaming might be a dying trend. Her colleague panicked, reminding her that their careers depended on it. She snapped back that these fakers didn't even know the basics and were disrespecting the real players who risked their lives. He then slyly asked why she was still working on the lower floors if she felt that way. She paused, admitting it was because it was boring. She told him to stop nagging and find some actual rookies worth scouting, but he didn't have the talent for it. She then confessed that she had only started climbing the tower to see Narukami Subaru in person. Losing her goal meant losing her drive. Suddenly he perked up, announcing he'd found an incredible kid. Yuika asked if it was another weirdo, but she clarified it was a new Narukami Subaru cosplayer. Yuika exploded, questioning his idea of rookie scouting when she was watching a Floor 2 stream with 0 viewers. She admitted it was a long shot, but explained that whenever he saw someone wearing that mask, she couldn't help but hope. His tirade was cut short by a censorship beep, costing him 1,000 credits as he apologized profusely. Meanwhile, Subaru began the Floor 2 trial, feeling the pressure of being watched for the first time. A new viewer popped into his stream, bringing the total to 2. The user, Love Money, asked if this was his first try. Subaru confirmed it was. The viewer seemed skeptical, questioning the wisdom of streaming a first attempt without knowing the route. Just then, a one-eyed bat monster lunged at him. With a swift, almost lazy motion, Subaru deflected its attack and sliced it in half. A notification confirmed the kill and awarded him 1 achievement point. He turned towards his stream's perspective and calmly asked if there was a problem with his method. As Subaru stepped into the Dungeon of Beginnings for his first attempt, his viewer count ticked up to 3. A new chatter praised his cracked reflexes, while another warned him not to get greedy and to find a party. Subaru politely declined the advice, stating his preference for doing things solo. The chat erupted in disbelief and mockery, predicting his imminent failure, but the viewer count doubled instantly. He realized that simply using his old name was a powerful draw. He gripped his demon blade tightly, resolving to push as far as he could. The kill notification flashed on screen, leaving his viewers wondering what they had just witnessed. A moment later, he was swarmed by a screeching cloud of one-eyed bats. Without hesitation, he plunged into the horde. His movements a whirlwind of precise, deadly strikes that left a trail of vanquished monsters in his wake. His viewers were left speechless, with one dramatically proclaiming that something ancient and powerful had awakened. As the achievement points tallied up, he casually explained that by focusing on sound, he could pinpoint the monster's numbers and locations. His chat immediately called him a liar, with one user boasting that it sounded easy enough. Subaru simply replied that if they understood the principle, they should be able to do it. He had no time to argue. He needed to stack as many points as possible before exiting. His viewers watched, horrified, as he continued walking in a straight line, ignoring any semblance of a map or strategy. He pressed on with unwavering focus until he reached a dead end, a cavern wall covered in hundreds of dormant, pulsating creatures. One by one, their single red eyes snapped open. The chat spammed their goodbyes, certain he was done for. Just then, a mission popped up from a user named MyDeadStream, offering 100 credits to kill everything. The chat called it a scummy bait tactic, but Subaru merely smiled behind his mask and accepted the challenge, thanking the user for the easy money. In an office miles away, a man slammed his fist on his desk, pulling at his hair in frustration over a player who had retired on floor 6. He quickly apologized for his outburst, then noticed his colleague Yuiko was staring intently at her screen, completely silent. He asked if she was okay, then began to panic, thinking she was mad about the 100 credits he had just gambled away on a mission bounty. He cut him off, her eyes wide with disbelief. That wasn't what she meant at all. She was still watching that streamer. A horrifying realization dawned on her colleague's face. On stream, the viewer count climbed to 15 as Subaru tore through the horde of bats single-handedly. Yuiko watched, mesmerized, her mind flashing back to a training session with the real Subaru. She had been amazed by his flawless technique, his ability to adjust his sword's angle mid-swing to perfectly counter every move. He had just shrugged, finding it odd that others couldn't do the same. To him, it was second nature. Remembering his own words, Subaru explained to the stream that one-eyed bats always charge head first, meaning a larger swarm created a larger, more predictable target. He demonstrated with another effortless sweeping attack. The chat was dumbfounded, with MyDeadStream demanding to know who had called this player a noob. Subaru simply concluded that explaining things was hard. Love Money chimed in, reminding him to claim his mission reward. Subaru paused, looked at his device in confusion, and asked how to do that. The chat mercilessly roasted him, calling him a grandpa when it came to technology. After receiving instructions, he claimed his 100 credits and prepared for one last push. Back at the agency, Yuiko was losing her mind, gushing about how insane the stream was. Her colleague could only stare, thinking she was the insane one. He tried to bring her back to reality, reminding her it was just floor 2, but she exploded with excitement. This was destiny, she declared, an earthling named Narukami Subaru. It had to be a reincarnation, an isekai. She swooned dramatically, but her colleague snapped her out of it, realizing she intended to scout this player. He argued that the streamer was a nobody with no viewers, but she shot back, calling him out for his gambling habit. Ignoring him, she resolved to watch what happened next. Her screen showed the masked player walking down a final corridor. He had reached the end of the dungeon. Pushing open a heavy stone door, he stepped into a large chamber. Seated in the center was Greg, a hulking wolf warrior, the infamous gatekeeper of floor 2. The objective updated: gain the warrior's acknowledgement. Subaru knew this creature wasn't meant to be killed, it was a judge of worth. Suddenly, a new mission flashed on his screen: 3,000 credits to defeat the wolf warrior. Subaru stared, stunned by the amount. The chat immediately labeled it a scam, knowing the warrior was supposed to be unbeatable. The massive beast stirred, slowly rising from its seated position. Greg, the floor 2 gatekeeper, stood to his full, intimidating height and greeted his new customer with a low, menacing snarl. The hulking wolf warrior Greg stood before Subaru, the objective clear, earned his acknowledgement. The beast seemed surprised to see a single challenger, questioning if Subaru was truly alone. Subaru coolly retorted, asking if he saw anyone else hiding in the room. Greg let out a low chuckle, calling him a funny human before leaning in and stating that he could smell the scent of a great warrior on him. A comment that left the stream chat wondering if warriors smelled like goblin corpses or just needed a shower. Subaru knew that wolf warriors could distinguish a person's very essence, and Greg acknowledged that Subaru already possessed the qualifications to pass through. He declared the trial over, and gestured for him to proceed. This was an unexpected turn. It had never happened in his previous life. Still, his primary goal was the gatekeeper himself. Greg was confused, wondering why his target would be him and not the exit. Subaru confirmed it, calmly stating that someone had commissioned him to kill the wolf warrior. The beast's lips curled into a grin, finding the audacity fitting for someone with such a powerful soul. Back at the Azure Sky Entertainment offices, Wika and Kiyoharu stood before their department head. The man, John Tail, was typing furiously before stopping to ask how many viewers this streamer had. Kiyoharu stammered that it was around 20, but Yuika proudly corrected him, announcing the count had just surpassed 30. John Tail looked up annoyed and asked if they were pulling some kind of prank. He chastised Kiyoharu for his workplace gambling, and both of them for bringing him a streamer with such a pathetic audience. Yuika, undeterred, corrected him again. 30 viewers, sir, which earned a frustrated shout that the number didn't matter. John began to suggest that Yuika, with her talent, should just start streaming herself, but she cut him off, her eyes glued to her device. She announced that the viewer count was now over 40, causing her boss to erupt in fury that she wasn't even listening. On stream, Subaru faced Greg's battle stance. The wolf warrior lunged, claws extended. Subaru gripped his demon blade, clearing his mind. The weapon activated, enhancing his stats at the cost of his stamina, but his Wedge of Greed skill immediately resisted the blade's negative side effects. He told himself to just do what he had always done. Their blades met with a deafening clang. Greg swiped again, and Subaru was forced to block a devastating overhead blow, his feet digging into the stone floor as he was pushed back. The wolf was incredibly strong. It was impossible to win a simple contest of strength. Even so, Greg seemed impressed, acknowledging that he was a true warrior. The gatekeeper unleashed a furious combo, roaring that Subaru was still no match for him. Subaru dodged and weaved, forced into a one-sided defense that amazed the viewers. As he parried, he realized that brute force wasn't the only path to victory. A smirk grew behind his mask. He told the warrior that he had been well entertained. Greg declared the fight would end now and lunged for the final blow. Subaru met his charge, stating that was his line. He ducked under the attack, pointing out how predictable his patterns were. He boasted that he could dodge them with his eyes closed as he plunged his sword into the beast's side. Greg howled in pain as Subaru followed up with a vicious flurry of strikes, culminating in a final, decisive slash. He drove his blade deep into the warrior's chest. With its last breath, Greg called him a remarkable warrior. A notification confirmed the impossible. The wolf warrior was defeated. Subaru instantly leveled up twice, his stats surging as he was awarded 500 achievement points. The chat exploded, realizing they had just witnessed the first ever defeat of Greg. Wounded but victorious, Subaru confirmed that he had defeated him, his viewer count now at 56. He received the 3,000 credit mission reward, thanking the user's safe wallet for their contribution. As his credit and AP totals updated, the massive stone doors behind Greg's body began to open. Subaru stared in shock. Instead of a simple exit, a massive wall appeared, covered with 13 different elemental trial options. The chat was floored. Most players were only ever offered 2 or 3 choices, with the number reflecting the player's latent talent. When the system prompted him to choose the Thunder trial, his viewers urged him on. Of course he would choose it. A notification confirmed his selection, and he vanished in a flash of light. In a private viewing room, Uika, Kiyoharu, and John Tail erupted in celebration. Uika was ecstatic, pointing out the streamer's insane growth to 60 viewers and the unprecedented 13 trial options. Even John had to admit the player was incredible for achieving the impossible and defeating the wolf warrior. Still, he remained cautious, stating that the risk of scouting a Floor 2 rookie was too great. Yuika, seizing the moment, proposed a bet. If Subaru failed the Thunder trial, her and Kiyoharu's salaries would be frozen for 5 years. If he succeeded, the company would sign him immediately. Kiyoharu yelped in protest at being dragged into her gamble. John remained skeptical, reminding her that only the original Narukami Subaru had ever mastered Thunder. With a confident grin, Yuika replied that they would never know unless they tried. John accepted the bet, and Yuika covered Kiyoharu's mouth to stifle his frantic objections. The Thunder trial commenced, teleporting Subaru into a grassy field. Before he could even get his bearings, a voice screamed a warning and a heavy body slammed into him, tackling him to the ground just as a massive shockwave erupted where he had been standing. Scrambling to his feet, he saw the source of the destruction. A hulking, white-skinned creature with black stripes, a fragment of the Titan race. The man who had saved him yelled at him for spacing out in the middle of a fight. A system notification confirmed the objective: defeat the Titan. This was wrong. His stream chat erupted in confusion. This boss monster wasn't supposed to appear until much later in the trial. This creature was a mid-boss, not a final one. He could only assume that defeating Greg, the gatekeeper, had somehow altered the trial's difficulty. The Titan swung its massive fist, shattering the earth. Subaru easily dodged the blow as the warrior rushed over, urging him to get to safety. Ignoring him, Subaru decided to end things quickly. He activated his demon blade, its power surging through him. He met the Titan's next attack head-on. As the monster brought its other fist down, he used the weapon as a ramp, launching himself into the air. The warrior could only watch in shock as Subaru vaulted clean over the giant's head, ran down its spine, and plunged his sword deep into the nape of its neck. The Titan let out a gargled roar. With cold precision, Subaru told it to shut up and stay quiet for the rest of its short life, twisting the blade for good measure. The creature let out a final pain gasp before its eyes went blank and it collapsed. A cascade of notifications flooded Subaru's vision. He had cleared Stage 4, leveled up 3 times, and earned a staggering 4,000 AP. More importantly, he had obtained 2 new items, the Titan's Heart and Thunder. The warrior stared in disbelief, the chat buzzing about the unprecedented rewards. He stammered an apology, his casual tone replaced with fearful respect. When he asked why Subaru was even there, Subaru simply stated his purpose, to defeat the Titan. The trial provided a brief respite, transporting him to a quiet village and into a small, furnished room. His viewers were clamoring to see his new loot. Curious himself, he opened his inventory. The first item was the Titan's Heart, a rare ring that increased stamina and healing efficiency. The second was Thunder, a rare set of armor that boosted defense and came with a daily use skill to negate all status ailments. Just as he equipped the sleek black armor, a new mission popped up from a user named Narakami Subari Love, offering 5,000 credits to obtain Thunder. It was immediately followed by a deluge of similar missions from other viewers, the credit rewards piling up rapidly. He thanked them all, promising to put on a good show. He hadn't realized so many people were rooting for him, for the name he carried. Perhaps the legend of Narukami Subaru was even greater than he remembered. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He called for them to enter, and the warrior from the battle walked in, accompanied by a blond man in shining plate armor. The warrior introduced him as Lord Peleus, the chief of the village knights. Peleus explained that due to recent Titan attacks, they were on high alert, with villagers on lockdown, making Subaru's appearance quite the coincidence. He then thanked Subaru for protecting the village while he was away. Subaru merely nodded, the name Peleus jogging a distant memory. The knight explained that they had located the Titan leader and intended to end the threat once and for all. He and the other warrior then bowed deeply, pleading for Subaru's aid in saving their village. As the chat began to panic, sensing impending doom for the beloved NPC, Subaru's eyes narrowed. He remembered now. In the original trial, Peleus dies in the very next stage. He told the knight to lift his head. Extending a hand, he agreed to help them. As their hands clasped, the next stage began. Survival. They marched out at sunset, a small company of knights led by Peleus. Subaru trailed behind, trying to keep up with the fast-moving chat on his device. Suddenly, the lead warrior held up a hand, calling for a halt. He pointed toward a massive bearded Titan resting in a clearing. That was him, the leader. Peleus laid out a simple plan. He would draw the leader's attention, and Subaru would strike from behind. Subaru stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. The Titan leader wasn't alone. He gestured to the ground beneath him. As Peleus and his men looked on in confusion, Subaru clarified that they were not fighting one Titan. The ground began to crack and heave as dozens of smaller Titans clawed their way out of the earth, completely surrounding the small band of knights. Peleus could only stare in horror. His men were instantly overwhelmed, their cries for help echoing across the field as the Titan leader watched the slaughter, a sadistic grin spreading across its face. Peleus screamed for his men to retreat to the mountain. The Titan ambush was a massacre. One knight was crushed beneath a giant foot, his younger brother screaming in anguish before being restrained by his comrades. Realizing the situation was hopeless, Peleus gave the order for all his men to retreat from the battlefield. He urged them to think of their families in the village, promising they would return to fight another day. He then ordered Falcon, the warrior who had been with Subaru, to lead the retreat. As the knights began to fall back, Falcon turned to Subaru, insisting that he must leave as well so they could regroup and fight later. Subaru, however, stood his ground and told Falcon that those were his lines. He asked the stunned knight why he hadn't left yet. He explained bluntly that Peleus was a liability. He couldn't move freely with him around, and if the knight truly wanted to stay, they could die happily together. Peleus refused to abandon an outsider, so he finally relented, promising to gather the soldiers and asking Subaru to hold out until then. With a final expression of gratitude, Peleus ran, shouting for Subaru to stay safe. Alone, Subaru faced the charging horde. He met them with a confident stride, declaring that they were fighting him now. He became a whirlwind of black and red, his blade effortlessly slicing through the lesser titans, dodging and weaving between their clumsy attacks. The giants roared in frustration as he cut down 2 more in a single motion. He knew that even if it was just a trial, he couldn't afford to leave anyone behind. Peleus ran as fast as his armor would allow, then paused, glancing back at the lone figure holding off the entire army. He grit his teeth and continued his retreat. The stream chat was in an uproar, convinced it was a suicide mission, and questioning why Subaru had sent the knights away when his score depended on their survival. But Subaru knew better. With his current skills, he believed he could save everyone, including Peleus, who was fated to die here. He continued his brutal dance, cutting down titan after titan. Taking them down one by one was easy enough, but the real problem was the time limit on his demon blade's power. He needed to find the boss and end this quickly. He launched himself into the air, using the titans' bodies as stepping stones to gain a better vantage point. He kicked off one's face, the chat going wild at the display of aerial combat, a known specialty of the original Narukami Subaru. He felt a slight change in his stamina depletion. The new equipment was already making a difference. Still, he knew he had to finish this before he reached his limit. He scanned the battlefield and finally spotted him, the bearded titan leader, laughing maniacally. The boss swung its massive club, and Subaru knew he had to finish it in a single hit. As the club swung down, he threw his hand forward, begging his newfound power to work. A notification flashed. You have cast Thunderclap. A brilliant explosion of golden lightning erupted from his hand, reverberating across the battlefield. The lesser titans were stunned, clutching their heads in agony. The leader, however, roared in fury, calling Subaru a vile human. Seizing the opening, Subaru activated his demon blade again and charged, his sword held high. He met the titan with a precise strike, the dark energy of his blade clashing with the monster's brute force. With a final powerful thrust, he drove his sword through the titan's jaw and up into its brain. The giant collapsed, defeated. The system declared Stage 5 cleared, an astounding feat. He leveled up twice more, but the chat was still reeling, unable to comprehend how he had just defeated monsters that weren't even supposed to be killable. Subaru, however, felt the toll of the battle. He hated the weakness of his new body. A true hero would have ended it more gracefully. Dark clouds gathered overhead, crackling with electricity. The remaining titans began to stir. A notification informed him that his Wedge of Greed skill had failed to resist the Demon Blade's side effects. He had been right. Even after clearing the stage, the monsters would continue to respawn until the actual trial was over. The irony was not lost on him. He was now being tormented by the very respawn mechanic he had so often exploited. His strength was fading. As the titans closed in, a dark, shadowy energy began to swirl around him, coalescing into a brilliant golden light. A powerful aura enveloped him, and with a final surge of energy, he unleashed another massive explosion. In a sun-dappled forest of ancient trees, a small wooden cabin sat in quiet seclusion. On its porch, a woman with messy black hair rocked gently in her chair, her attention fixed on a glowing device in her hands. A man with long white hair emerged from the cabin's shadow, his presence sharp and questioning as he asked what she was doing. She replied with a casual comment about the fresh air, a simple pleasure she claimed they could only now afford to enjoy. He was not swayed by the peaceful atmosphere. He declared that after a long year, it was about time to put an end to their situation, his voice laced with resolve. His serious tone, however, seemed to bounce right off her. He leaned closer, demanding to know what was so captivating. She tilted the screen, showing him the image of a masked player she identified as Narukami Subaru. The name hit the white-haired man like a physical blow. He shouted Subaru's name, his voice cracking with disbelief. She quickly clarified that it was not their Subaru, just some new streamer on the second floor using the name. Yet, she asked if he realized it too, hinting at the familiar impossible skill flashing across the screen. She spoke wistfully, imagining that if the real Subaru had survived, Kyojo Itsuki would have been gone from the tower long ago. The man, Shu, had heard enough. He insisted that Subaru was dead and she needed to face that reality, turning to leave, yelling at him about living in a dead man's shadow. Xiao shot back, questioning why she was watching an impersonator if she was so eager to move on. She stammered that she was only passing the time. Her excuse died on her lips as Xiu's expression shifted from anger to sheer shock. He grabbed the device, his eyes locked on the screen. He watched the streamer unleash a massive burst of golden energy that obliterated the charging titans, as a system notification announced that the skill ended up in acquired, along with a massive point reward. On the battlefield, Subaru's viewers went wild over his new skill. He knew, however, that it wasn't a technique that could be learned through normal means. He was just thankful the trial had ended when it did. Credits from his amazed audience poured in, his balance swelling to over 20,000. As a thank you to his new patrons, he decided to resume the trial. When the next wave of lumbering titans appeared, Subaru invested his entire fortune. He spent 20,000 credits to upgrade his skill, strengthening it to resist the backlash from the powerful finger ability. For now, he chose to channel the crackling energy into his hand alone. He met the new wave head-on, his lightning-wreathed fist crashing into them before he decided to imbue his demon blade as well. It was time to go wild like the old days. he became a vortex of red and black energy, tearing through the horde in a brutal, beautiful dance of destruction. When the last Titan fell, he was left panting heavily. He cursed himself for getting carried away. He had planned to conserve his strength, but had misjudged how much to hold back. As he caught his breath, a group of armored figures crested a hill. Peleus and his knights had returned. The commander rushed towards him, calling him their savior. Subaru watched him approach, letting out an exhausted sigh. That dumbass had actually come back, collapsing dramatically at his feet. Meanwhile, at the Azure Sky office, Yuika sat on a couch with her head in her hands. Her boss, John Tail, asked Kiyoharu if her theatrics were really necessary. Kiyoharu wisely replied that he didn't understand the hearts of women, wondering what to do. She worried that her business proposal email was too curt and that she should have used some emojis. Her boss told her to snap out of it, asking if she was love-struck when it was just a business deal. She shot up, declaring that she was a devoted fan first and a manager second. With newfound confidence, she announced that the Thunder skill, once exclusive to the legendary Narukami Subaru, now belonged to this new one. John Tail stroked his chin, conceding that such a skill couldn't be learned by just anyone. This man, he agreed, was worth watching. Suddenly, Uika gasped, her eyes wide with excitement. She announced that Narukami Subaru had read their email. Her joy lasted only a moment before her face fell. He had just left her on red. She froze in place, a monument to digital rejection. Kiyoharu stared at her petrified form and dryly informed his boss that she had died standing up. In his high-tech studio, surrounded by figurines of legendary players, a prominent streamer known for analyzing combat capability prepared to go live. Known as Hawkeyes, he had built a reputation on his sharp insight, covering everyone from the rising star Kurokawa Amon to the world's current #1 player, Kyojo Itsuki. He had even analyzed the generation-spanning legend, Narukami Subaru. With a click, his broadcast began. He greeted his viewers and announced his focus for the day. The new player, also named Narukami Subaru. The chat was immediately skeptical, but Hawkeyes urged them to keep an open mind. He then played the footage from the Thunder trial, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Hawkeyes himself was stunned, pointing out the newcomer's incredible concentration. He explained that Subaru executed a newly learned skill with absolute proficiency, applying only the necessary strength and wasting zero power. The streamer marveled at the flawless judgment, wondering aloud where this monster came from while noting that half his audience couldn't even grasp the skill on display. He concluded that this player was destined for greatness and would be a recurring feature on his show. Prompted by his chat, he realized he'd forgotten his signature closing remarks. With a glint in his eye, he made a shocking declaration. In terms of pure control, this rookie might even surpass the original Narukami Subaru at his peak. Elsewhere, Subaru jolted awake from a fitful sleep. System notifications informed him that Stage 6 was pending and his fatigue had been fully recovered. He was given the option to suspend the trial, a choice requiring both a completed stage and zero fatigue. Though physically restored, his mind was still exhausted, so he decided to take a break. He grabbed his device and noticed his viewer count had unexpectedly surged. Thanking everyone for watching, he announced he would take a day off before the next stream and ended the broadcast. He stepped out of the trial space into a stark white waiting area. A moment later, his device buzzed with an incoming message. It was an offer from a woman named Yuika at Azure Sky Entertainment, promising full support for his streaming career. Subaru, removing his mask, wondered if it was just spam mail, though the company name sounded vaguely familiar. Later, at a small cafe, he sat researching the message. Azure Sky Entertainment was a major multi-channel network, a type of company that hadn't existed in his time. He was surprised to learn how big they were. He then found an article quoting Hawkeye's bold statement about him. The comments section, a storm of debate. Realizing the blunt streamer was affiliated with Azure Sky, Subaru had to admit the man had a keen eye for talent. Just then, Isaac walked up to the cafe, his face a mask of fury. He was reading the same article, incensed that some second-floor nobody was being compared to the legend. He cursed Hawkeyes, vowing to tear the streamer's eyes out. Spitting on the ground, he stormed inside, complaining about his ruined morning. He let out a bitter laugh and then froze, spotting Subaru sitting at a table. He felt it must be a cursed day to be haunted by the name Subaru everywhere he went. While Subaru was focused on his device, Isaac loomed over his table and deliberately knocked over his hot coffee. Subaru jumped back with a yelp of pain. Isaac offered a fake apology, feigning surprise at recognizing him. He mocked Subaru, remarking that the second floor must be tiny for them to meet so often. Subaru ignored him, prompting Isaac to sneeringly offer to pay for the drink, but the continued silence made his eye twitch. Subaru simply stood and started to leave. He turned back only to remind Isaac of their last encounter, asking if he had a screw loose. Enraged, Isaac grabbed his shirt, threatening to beat him up just like he used to. Subaru effortlessly gripped Isaac's hand and, claiming he didn't have time for this, pried the bully's fingers away with surprising force. Isaac stared in disbelief, shocked by this newfound strength. Subaru walked off, sarcastically thanking him for the compensation for the coffee. Isaac could only sputter in rage as Subaru walked out the door, which swung shut behind him. Isaac sighed, his smooth climb up the tower suddenly feeling complicated. He clenched his fist, feeling mocked by both the original and the new Subaru, and stormed out in a fury. Outside, Subaru glanced at his device one last time. He typed a quick reply. Far away, Yuika relaxed in a bubble bath, her rubber ducky floating beside her. Her device lit up with a new message. It was from Narukami Subaru, containing just 4 words. A simple agreement to meet in person. In a waterlogged dungeon littered with the bodies of defeated foes, Subaru gripped the cursed blade, pulsating with dark energy. A system alert confirmed he had reached the boss room, the exiled lizard man's hideout. Another notification praised his wedge of greed skill for resisting the blade's influence, though Subaru knew he was still adjusting to his new body's limits. From the darkness, a spark of flame appeared, quickly materializing into a massive, fiery salamander. The beast let out a piercing shriek. To avoid the previous trial's disastrous power overload, Subaru knew he had to carefully measure how much of the thunder skill he could safely handle. He channeled the energy into his legs, launching himself toward the beast. The familiar instincts of his past self guided his movements. He then poured the thunder's energy into his demon blade, charging forward in a blinding streak of light. The system warned him that his resistance had failed and his fatigue spiked. Yet the muscle memory of his former life took over, allowing him to land a perfect, decisive strike. The dungeon was cleared and a series of notifications announced his level up and stat increases. He emerged from the dungeon into a moonlit forest, immediately checking his status. His fatigue was at 61, a manageable level that meant he could push his power even further. He then examined the upgrade cost for his Wedge of Greed skill and grimaced. The price doubling with each level was brutal. He sighed, wishing a good job would just fall from the sky, when a voice from the shadows asked if he was hunting. His eyes widened as a familiar silhouette emerged from the trees. It was Isaac. The bully stepped forward with a smirk, remarking how Subaru always managed to be surprising. Subaru could only think what a persistent pest Isaac was. Isaac explained that he was past his limit and his anger had boiled over, stepping closer to Subaru. He then proposed they settle things once and for all. Subaru remained silent, assessing his longtime tormentor. Elsewhere, under the glow of a city at night, the streamer Hawkeyes was walking when a hand gestured for his attention. It was his boss, John Tail, who greeted him and asked about his streams. Hawkeyes admitted they were so-so, with a loyal but stagnant audience. His boss wisely noted that slow growth was often the most stable. Cutting to the chase, Hawkeyes asked why he'd been called out, earning a compliment for his sharp perception. The boss then asked if Hawkeyes had been serious in his glowing review of the rookie, Narukami Subaru. Hawkeyes confirmed that, talent-wise, the kid might even surpass the original, though reaching that potential was another story entirely. His eyes glinted with certainty. John Tail nodded, revealing he was now considering scouting Subaru for the agency. Hawkeyes laughed, pointing out that the rookie was a nobody with almost no viewers. The boss agreed, but said Hawkeyes' conviction had won him over. He then proposed a collaboration between the two streamers to boost the rookie's numbers. Back in the quiet forest, Isaac noted they were finally alone, which Subaru curtly confirmed. The bully immediately began to taunt him, assuming he'd chickened out of the dungeon early. He mocked Subaru for getting a little limelight and thinking he could become the next legend, cursing the original Narukami Subaru for not staying in his grave. Isaac seethed, complaining that everyone was getting on his nerves, and asked if Subaru didn't feel the same. Subaru sighed, admitting he never expected to find himself in an era of so many wannabes. He then asked Isaac a direct question. Why did he hate him so much? When Isaac replied it was because of his name, Subaru pressed further, asking why he hated a name everyone else admired. Isaac was momentarily stunned, then exploded, asking how Subaru could say that knowing who his father was. Subaru coolly retorted, asking what his dad had to do with anything and why a grown man was still suffering from such intense daddy issues. Isaac roared that his father was Reinhardt, a high ranker from the 9th floor. The name struck a chord deep within Subaru's memory. Reinhardt, the one-swordsman. A flashback played in his mind. News reports screaming about an unbelievable event. The upstart Narukami Subaru defeating the ranker Reinhardt with a single devastating slash. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. Reinhardt lay defeated but defiant, unable to move. In the present, Isaac's face was contorted with rage, warning Subaru not to speak his father's name so casually. Subaru finally understood. Isaac's entire grudge was tied to his father's humiliating defeat. He then changed his tone, his voice laced with cold anger, asking if Isaac had any idea how much the original Hosoi had suffered because of him. Isaac erupted in flames, threatening him to shut up. Subaru simply replied with a quiet no. Unfazed, he stood his ground as Isaac's power flared to life. The bully declared an end to the conversation, snarling that it was time for Subaru to die. Surrounded by flames, Isaac declared his sickening hatred for Narukami Subaru, dismissing him as an overhyped nobody. He sneered that Subaru's arrogance led his entire low-ranking guild, Blue Eyes, to ruin. He took satisfaction in their demise, believing they were all rotting in hell for their deeds. He then turned his fiery gaze on the new Subaru, proclaiming that sharing the name was the end of his luck before unleashing a massive explosion. As the dust settled, Isaac breathed heavily. He offered a mock apology, feigning regret for his cruelty before wondering aloud if he should go kill the masked streamer next. The word masked caught his attention as he stared into the inferno. From within the flames, a voice coolly asked if he meant this mask, and a silhouetted figure emerged unscathed. Isaac couldn't believe it, shocked that anyone could survive a direct hit like that. Subaru, annoyed by the endless chatter, told him to shut up and lunged forward. He moved with blinding speed, landing a series of brutal blows that left Isaac gasping in pain, sending Isaac sprawling to the ground, where he coughed up blood. Standing over him, Subaru stated that a man-child like Isaac had no right to badmouth Blue Eyes. Isaac, still reeling, couldn't comprehend how he was so easily defeated. Subaru decided to have some fun. He posed a question, asking Isaac to identify who stood before him. Was it the crybaby Husoi Subaru he used to bully? The masked streamer he just saw on the news? Or, perhaps, he hinted with a chilling smile, was it Blue Eyes Narukami Subaru himself? Isaac dismissed the last option as bullshit, settling on the idea that he was facing the streamer. He scoffed that the thunder skill was unimpressive if even trash like Subaru could learn it, questioning how a weakling could ever hope to beat him. Subaru's response was a bit of reverse psychology with an Uno reverse card twist. He mused that if a loser like Hosoi learned thunder, it must mean he was now stronger than the legendary Narukami Subaru. He goaded Isaac, asking if he wasn't right, before unleashing a powerful arc of dark energy. Isaac was stunned as the attack sliced past him, barely missing. Subaru called his logic completely wrong, leaving Isaac confused. He then repeated his earlier questions with newfound intensity, demanding to know if Isaac understood Hosoi's suffering and why he wouldn't just shut up. A man-child like him, he declared, had no right to speak of them. The tone, the posture, the sheer pressure, it was all too familiar. Isaac's eyes widened in terror as the pieces clicked into place. He stammered, recognizing the presence of Blue Eyes just as Subaru moved in, a blur of motion and dark energy. With his opponent dispatched, Subaru declared that playtime was over. He stood over the fallen bully, calling this more than enough fan service. It was, he thought, payment for borrowing his friend's body. Back in the cafe, patrons murmured about Isaac's earlier outburst, wondering if he was some kind of obsessed fanboy. At a nearby table, Subaru sat in his masked streamer persona. He decided to stick with his plan of keeping his identity hidden, recognizing the immense advantage of anonymity. Just then a woman arrived, apologizing for the wait. She nervously introduced herself as Wiyaka, the manager who had contacted him, her excitement barely contained. Subaru shook her hand, and she gushed about what an honor it was to finally meet him. She was struck by how much he resembled the original legend, her mind racing with the possibility that the real Narukami had returned. Subaru noticed her staring and asked if something was wrong, snapping her out of her daze. She immediately recalled her boss's stern instructions to be professional and win the client's trust, mentally kicking herself for messing up the intro. She composed herself as Subaru asked if she was a fan of the late Narukami Subaru. She enthusiastically confirmed she was a die-hard supporter. He gently reminded her that he wasn't the real one and was probably younger than her, so she could relax. Wika quickly pivoted, insisting she was a fan of his as well. She excitedly recounted being his very first viewer, watching him conquer every trial from the beginning. Subaru was taken aback. She remembered his journey in more detail than he did. He admitted it felt surreal to hear that she'd watched his clumsy beginnings. Yuika agreed, calling it destiny and explaining it was why she begged her company to let her manage him. Switching to professional mode, she presented a contract. She explained that Azure Sky would handle all branding, commercials, merchandise, and highlights, built around the Narukami Subaru name. All he needed to do in return was keep streaming. He wondered if it was really that simple, but Uika explained that being the first streamer to learn Thunder made him a hot commodity. He then asked if all managers at her agency were like her, causing her to fluster and downplay her own reliability. He clarified that he hadn't meant it as an insult. From her powerful aura, he could tell she was no ordinary player, and wondered how much the average power level had risen for someone like her to be a simple manager. The realization hit him. His future opponents would be even stronger, and he had no time to rest. Meanwhile, Yuika fretted that she had seemed unreliable and considered forcing him to sign the contract. But Subaru extended his hand, telling her she seemed trustworthy. He looked forward to working with her. Overjoyed, she shook his hand, stammering her agreement. The stream went live, and Subaru was greeted by a flood of messages from his rapidly growing audience. The viewer count was already over 700. He realized Uika's early announcements had worked wonders. Her promotional work had been efficient. He announced it was time to get started and initiated the next phase. He materialized in a rainy forest, outside a large military tent where Peleus and his knights were gathered around a map. The knight commander asked if their benefactor was awake yet and was told he was not. Some of the knights were skeptical, doubting they could trust an outsider who had supposedly killed the Titan boss single-handedly. One even suggested Peleus might have been tricked, questioning if the defeated monster was truly the boss. Peleus angrily defended Subaru's actions, but his argument was cut short when another knight announced that their benefactor had awakened. Peleus rushed to Subaru's side, asking if he was all right. Subaru assured him he could walk on his own. The other knights openly muttered their disbelief, calling him weak and his mask sketchy. He addressed their doubts head-on, asking if they truly didn't believe him or simply didn't want to. At his meeting with Uika, she had explained a feature that allowed him to speak only to his viewers, a useful tool for such boring encounters. Before the knights could respond, a veteran warrior stepped forward to thank him, introducing himself as Dale. He had been defending the village when his forces were crushed. The monster responsible, he explained, was far worse than the Titan boss. Subaru asked if there was a more dangerous foe, and Dale began to recount the ancient lore. The true Titans who warred with the gods had been sealed away long ago, and the current ones were merely remnants. However, the Titan that had appeared after the boss's defeat was a legendary one, a creature Dale thought no longer existed. The knights were visibly shaken by this revelation. Subaru, however, was unfazed, stating simply that they would just have to kill it. Dale was taken aback by his confidence, warning that it was a suicide mission. The other knights whispered that his bravado came from ignorance. Peleus then spoke up, sharing an ancient legend of a thunder shard hidden on Millennium Mountain. He believed Subaru was the only one who could find it. A flashback showed the village being overrun by titans. The legendary titan Padal had appeared after his son was killed, slaughtering the knights in a blind rage. He had crushed a knight in his massive fist, vowing to use the blood of humans to send his son to the afterlife. Back in the present, Subaru looked up from a cliff, spotting the colossal titan in the distance. His chat exploded with comments about the impossible difficulty. He knew the creature was dead set on killing him. Peleus informed him that it would take the Titans 3 days to reach their location, giving Subaru a tight deadline to find the shard or flee. He set off on horseback toward Millennium Mountain, convinced that acquiring the Thunder Shard was the true objective of the trial. After all, he thought, echoing his old self, there is no trial that cannot be cleared. The catchphrase slipped out accidentally, but his viewers, some of whom recognized the famous line, didn't seem to notice its origin, much to his relief. The mission payouts weren't bad either. He urged his horse onward through the storm, riding hard until he reached the base of the mountain. He had arrived at the supposed location of the Thunder Shard, a jagged, imposing peak. He began his ascent. Peleus's words echoed in his mind. The shard was a thing of legend, its true nature, an item, a power, or even a person unknown. All they knew was its location and the fact that a wielder of thunder had once wiped out the Titans entirely. Meanwhile, Uika was on the phone with her boss, excitedly reporting her success. He praised her lavishly, joking that she was finally becoming a decent person. She took the backhanded compliment in stride, mentioning that she had also met with Hawkeyes and had more news. Hanging up, she flopped onto her bed, triumphant. Her work was done and it was time to watch the stream. She pulled up the broadcast, basking in the otaku bliss of seeing her client both in person and on screen. When Subaru's catchphrase came through the speakers, her eyes widened. She sat bolt upright, a sweat forming as she realized he had just used Narukami Subaru's iconic line from over 20 years ago. On the mountain, lightning crackled around the peak. Subaru, surrounded by electrical energy, was unfazed by his chat's panicked messages. He planted his feet firmly on the rock and drew back his fist, intending to test which was tougher, him or the mountain. He unleashed a thunder-infused punch that shattered the stone and, with a grin, declared that he'd found it. Subaru planted his feet on the wet, rocky ground. His hand pulsed with golden energy as his online audience expressed their confusion. He knew they couldn't feel the immense thunder that was calling to his own. He stood before a colossal stone door, the path forward sealed. Taking a determined step, he approached the gate as his viewers debated how he could possibly open it without a key. He reached out a gloved hand and touched the cold stone surface. A system notification confirmed he had cast Thunder, his own skill resisting the backlash. This was the only way. The true trial lay beyond this door. He drew back his fist, channeling the fervent call of the energy into a single point. He had no choice but to answer the summons, unleashing his power in a brilliant flash. The massive stone doors shattered inward, groaning as they parted to reveal a brightly lit passage that beckoned him forward. After a brief pause, He stepped through the threshold, walking into the unknown. He had entered the pathway of thunder, a place he could not leave until the stage was cleared. Meanwhile, back at the knight's camp under the pouring rain, Dale and Peleus gathered with their men around a map. Dale questioned if Peleus truly believed the outsider could retrieve the Thunder Shard. Peleus answered with absolute certainty, explaining that after the man's display of skill, there was no reason for doubt. Dale was unconvinced, muttering that they were all doomed. A younger knight, trembling nearby, agreed with the sentiment, recalling the terrifying strength of the titans he had witnessed firsthand. Peleus approached the terrified man, urging him to have a little more faith in the hero who had helped them so selflessly. The knight could only stammer that such words were easy for him to say. The tense discussion was cut short by a sudden commotion, as mugs clattered to the floor. A scout burst into the tent, shouting that the enemy was coming, sending a wave of panic through the knights. Subaru found himself in a cavern of shimmering ice. He looked around cautiously, proceeding deeper into the tunnel, while wondering what this trial demanded of him. His viewers commented that there was nothing there. Subaru, however, reasoned that thunder was merely an invisible charge before it discharged. That was why he couldn't see it. This was a test for senses beyond sight. Recalling the trial's name, he focused on the immense energy that continued to pull him forward. An idea sparked in his mind. He bent down and picked up a small piece of stone, tossing it ahead of him into the seemingly empty air. As the stone flew, it began to react with the invisible energy, crackling with golden lightning, before exploding in a brilliant flash that shocked his audience. He had his answer, but it was a grim one. He had no choice but to push deeper into the gauntlet. This was simply a test of endurance, and he guessed that failure meant death. Donations and missions began flooding his screen, a mix of encouragement and warnings. He simply offered his thanks and pressed on. In a cozy room far away, a stew bubbled over a fire. Asura Shu sat comfortably by the hearth, watching something intently on his phone. He was so absorbed that he jumped when a woman suddenly entered the room, asking him what he was hiding so secretively. She teased him, asking if he was watching adult videos. Flustered, Shu denied it, claiming his eyes were just tired. Unconvinced, she plopped down beside him, joking that pervy people's hair grows faster. She explained that she had gotten bored after he told her to stop watching the stream. When he questioned her presence, she feigned offense at his reaction. This caused him to lose his composure entirely, shouting that she was twisting his words. She complained about his yelling, and he snapped back that she could sit wherever she wanted. He furtively muted his device, which she noted was strange as he usually ignored her. Annoyed, she stood to leave, though he awkwardly invited her to stay. She slammed the door behind her. Shu let out a sigh of relief, thankful he hadn't been caught. He knew she would cause a scene if she found out he was watching the stream. He thought about his old leader. Subaru would never have forgotten them. This new player's personality and speech were eerily similar, even using the same grim phrasing about failure. Yet his strange eagerness for credits was completely out of character. Shu wondered what was truly going on, just as a hand clamped down on his shoulder. The woman was back, asking if he really thought she wouldn't notice. Her expression turned dark as she leaned in, informing him that it was 100 years too early for him to be hiding things from her. A new objective appeared before him: forge the path of thunder. Sweat and pain mixed on his face as he steeled his resolve. He took a step forward, his body immediately racked by golden lightning, and a progress bar appeared, showing he had barely started. The electricity coursed through his arm, a sensation he found strangely familiar after a lifetime of wielding thunder. He focused his gaze, knowing he had a long way to go. He took another agonizing step, realizing the trial at least showed him the finish line. He informed his viewers he would be unable to read the chat from now on. Reaching the goal was a given, but he intended to aim for something much higher. Elsewhere, Hawkeye stared at his monitor, lost in thought. His boss, John Tail, had just proposed a collaboration between him and Subaru. John set down his mug, explaining that an analyst could only do half the work in making a stream popular. Hawkeyes acknowledged this, knowing it depended on the current players and trends. John noted that Subaru's stream felt less like a fan chat and more like a seasoned player's vlog. He suggested Hawkeyes do a spectator-style broadcast with him, advising him to ride the rookie's momentum and become a star that rises with him. The proposition struck a chord, his eyes widening with renewed ambition. He had turned to streaming because he lacked the confidence to climb the tower himself, even though his eye was still fixed on the prize. He desperately wanted to be a star. He wondered if he could truly become like the legends he admired. He nearly fell out of his chair as he was pulled from his daydream, shaking his head for getting distracted during work. He glanced back at the stream and cried out in shock, wondering if Subaru had completely lost his mind. The live feed flickered with static. Subaru grunted in agony, his body bruised and bleeding under the relentless electrical assault. He slammed his foot down, forcing his way through the storm. He panted heavily, understanding that the stronger the thunder, the deeper it could penetrate his body. He decided this intensity was sufficient. The energy began to flow through him, starting with his core meridians as the system announced his progress. The thunder was taking root inside him, permanently increasing his mana. He had to make this power his own, allowing the energy to spread through every pathway in his system. He was using a shortcut to clear the impurities from his body. Normally, one would use their own mana for this slow process, but he was using the trial's thunder to do it instantly, though the pain was brutal. Blood sprayed from his mouth as his body was torn apart from the inside. In a quiet room, a woman watched the stream on her phone, her expression grim as she watched him suffer. She knew he was trying to penetrate his thin pulses, doing so while moving and using an external force. The pain had to be beyond imagination. Most people would pass out instantly. She knew that while trial pain caused no real damage, the sensation was identical to reality. She bit her lip, wondering why anyone would go to such lengths. As Subaru's progress hit 50% and his mana increased again, his mind flooded with guilt. He felt he had practically killed his old comrades. A memory surfaced of him telling his guild that no trial was impossible, smiling as he reassured them and boasted that he would always be the one who wins in the end. If only he hadn't been so reckless. If his arrogance hadn't pushed them so hard, none of them would have died. The grinning, blood-soaked face of his betrayer flashed in his mind, taunting him that this is what happens when you get cocky. It was all his fault. He screamed the words into the storm before finally collapsing to the blood-stained ice, his body twitching as the lightning continued its work. He awoke in a sun-drenched field of green grass, wondering where he was. In the distance, he saw them, his old guildmates gathered around a campfire. A wave of shock washed over him as he recognized their faces. They were all there. Shuhei, Toshiya, Kei, Iori, Shio, and Reina. Relief loosened the tension in his body, and he felt himself fall into the comforting thought that it had all been a terrible dream. He approached his friends from behind, a tearful smile on his face as he sought confirmation that the nightmare was over. He greeted them, but the moment he spoke their names, the dream twisted into something horrid. Their faces warped with rage, accusing him of dragging them to their deaths. He stared in horror at his former friends. The world turned a bloody red as another guildmate asked why he always talked so big before revealing a fatal wound and questioning why he wasn't protected. His mind reeled as the entire guild, now monstrous and accusatory, surrounded him. He could only stammer in terror as their desperate cries to be saved echoed in his ears. He screamed out to them, begging them not to leave him behind, his desperation mounting as he fell to his knees and pleaded. The vision shattered and he was back on the icy ground, gasping for air. He realized it was the hallucination common to the pulse penetration process. He had nearly succumbed to psychosis. As his progress neared completion, he stood, his body crackling with energy. He thanked the stupid trial for reminding him exactly why he was still alive. The image of his betrayer Itsuki burned in his mind. Meanwhile, the village was in chaos. Terrified villagers armed themselves with farm tools as a monstrous titan loomed over them, its face split by a horrifying grin. The knights panicked, realizing the masked hero was gone and that this must be the real boss. One insisted their benefactor would return, but Peleus furiously admonished the others for their doubt, asking how they could call themselves knights while having no shame. Dale placed a calming hand on his shoulder, agreeing that their duty was to protect the village, not point fingers. He drew his glowing sword, declaring that knights are the ones who protect and rallying the men to die with honor. They charged into battle. Back in the cavern, Subaru's progress hit 99%. A glowing orb of golden energy materialized ahead. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was the goal. A critical fatigue warning flashed as blood trickled from his lips. Ignoring the danger, he pushed himself to take one final step and leaped forward. In the village, Dale struck the Titan down with a devastating blow. The beast roared in triumph as the Titan was brutally wounded. Peleus immediately charged in to aid his fallen comrade, shouting for the others to leave the rest to him. He launched himself from the ground, using the Titan's own body as a platform to gain height. With a powerful two-handed grip on his sword, he brought it down in a flurry of slashes. The Titan growled in pain just before its head exploded in a shower of gore. As Peleus landed, the knights erupted in cheers, believing they had won. They surrounded the corpse, but as Peleus breathed a sigh of relief, Dale warned him that it wasn't over. That wasn't the dangerous one he had meant. The other knights scoffed, thinking the monster was nothing special. One began to celebrate, saying all that was left was to clean up the rest, just before a colossal foot crushed him and his comrades into paste. Dale and Peleus looked up in horror as the true Titan, Pytal, revealed itself on a whole different level of power. At that exact moment, Subaru's progress reached 99%. He reached out and grasped the orb, completing the trial. He would apologize to his fallen friends in hell, but first, he had a souvenir to deliver to Kyojo Itsuki. Vengeance fueled him as he stood tall, and the golden energy exploded from his body. Finally, it was over. The power settled within him, coursing through his very being. System notifications confirmed his success, pulse penetration complete, mana amplified, skill speed increased, and all stats raised. He coughed up a final gout of blood, muttering that if there was going to be a final hit, a little warning would have been nice, apparently forgetting he signed up for the Path of Thunder, not a 5-star resort. He collapsed backward onto the shattered ice as a final message declared. John Tail watched the stream, lost in thought. He commented on Subaru's recklessness as the chat buzzed about the insane difficulty and wondered when the player would wake up. He concluded that Subaru was not suited to be a streamer. Just then, his phone buzzed with a call from Hawkeyes. John explained he was watching Subaru's stream, and Hawkeyes excitedly confirmed he had just witnessed the crazy event as well. John told the worked-up analyst to explain himself clearly, but Hawkeyes was certain that Subaru was destined to be a star, both as a player and a streamer. John disagreed, stating Subaru seemed more like a player to him. Hawkeyes explained that was precisely the point. The core concept viewers sought was a Subaru who closely resembled the legendary original, who was a player, not a streamer. This broadcast, he continued, would allow them to witness the birth of a new legend in real time. The live feed showed Subaru's hand twitching as he slowly pushed himself up, his viewers relieved he was finally awake. He gasped for air, checking his fatigue levels. His stats had risen and his fatigue had dropped, which he considered a win despite the unexpected final thunderstrike. A flood of mission complete notifications appeared, bringing his credit total to a respectable 20,420. It still wasn't enough to enhance his Wedge of Greed skill, but he wondered if defeating the Titan might do the trick. He held the glowing orb in his hands, the key to his victory. The legendary Thunder Spear was a rare, one-time use item that didn't even look like a spear. He opened his inventory and explained to his bewildered audience that high-ranking items could change shape depending on the conditions. With his weapon in hand, he announced it was time to go kill the Titan. Back in the village, Peleus screamed as the colossal Titan Padal loomed over him and Dale. Peleus let out a deafening roar, its immense power radiating outwards as its title, Titan King Grodd, appeared. Peleus watched in horror as one of his knights turned and fled. The terrified knight babbled that he had tried to warn them before falling to his knees before the Titan, begging for mercy. Pydal questioned the knight's plea to a god, enraged at being compared to such a despicable being. Dale grabbed the cowardly knight, demanding he get up, then ordered Peleus to evacuate the villagers and run as far as he could. Peleus could only scream Dale's name in anguish as Pydal's foot came down, crushing the veteran knight and the coward into nothingness. Peleus staggered back, seeing no path to victory. Their escape route was now blocked by an army of smaller titans. His eyes widened in panic. In a desperate gamble, he shouted that he knew who killed the Titan's son. The giant paused, asking who had killed his son. With a surge of false confidence, Peleus declared the killer was over there, pointing his sword toward the distant mountain. He claimed the person was accumulating power to strike him down, desperately pleading for the Titan to believe him. Pydal turned to look, but then swiftly struck Peleus down, stating that his words were mixed with lies. The Titan demanded to know if his son's killer was not there, or if the knight had simply pointed his sword in a random direction. Pydal's threat was cut short by a massive explosion from the mountain peak, which drew both of their attentions. A wave of golden energy washed over the landscape, and Peleus looked on in stunned disbelief. A new notification declared the start of Stage 7. Subaru stood on the cliffside facing Pydal and his army, knowing this had to be the final stage. He thought that if an even stronger enemy appeared, this would barely count as a second-floor trial. Still, it was okay. He only needed to hit the Titan once. Pydal was no match for him now, but he had to strike before the Titan could act. He initiated the Thunder Spear, commencing its activation sequence. Golden energy gathered in the sky, swirling into a powerful vortex. As the charge rate climbed and his fatigue spiked again, he focused the energy into his hand. The charge rate continued to rise as he clenched his fist around the raw power. His Wedge of Greed skill attempted to resist the secondary effects but failed. Its level was too low for a legendary item. He had no choice but to endure the strain with his own body. His viewers joked that suffering had become his new kink. Pydal finally noticed the brilliant display of power, and Subaru dryly acknowledged that it was hard to miss. With a display this big, it was unreasonable to expect otherwise. Pydal identified the thunder, realizing he was facing the one who had killed his son. The Titan King roared that he had found him and launched himself from the village, leaving a bewildered Peleus behind, who could only watch in horror as Pydal abandoned the villagers to their fate. Pydal turned his back on the mountain, addressing his fallen son Pydal. He promised to take his son's pain and redirecting it, vowing to give it right back to the killer. Pydal unleashed a powerful shockwave, roaring with rage. As the Thunder Spear continued to charge, Subaru prepared to throw it, the Titan hurtling toward him like a meteor. Subaru knew the odds were 50-50. It would either hit or it wouldn't. As his viewers debated the impossibly fast attack, he focused his gaze, his mind clear. A memory surfaced of a man with a familiar intensity, who had once taught him the art of the throw. He had been told to ditch all extra thinking and forget about predictions, to ignore the weapon's weight and shape. The man had said he was different from other spearmen because he was Narukami Subaru. As the spear reached 95% charge, Subaru wondered what he was supposed to do with this abstract advice. The man in his memory reminded him he wasn't throwing a normal spear. It was simple, he had explained with a smile. He wasn't supposed to throw it, he was supposed to blast it. Pytal slammed into the mountainside, closing the distance in an instant. Subaru held his ground, waiting for the perfect moment. The Titan grunted, crashing through the rock, its foot slamming down just inches from Subaru. It lunged forward, its enormous body propelled by pure rage as the spear pulsed with power. Subaru pointed the weapon forward, and the system announced the charge was complete. He had only one chance. As Pytal opened its mouth to attack, Subaru declared he would end this in a single blow. He didn't throw the spear, he unleashed its power in a blinding flash of golden energy that shot from his hand and struck the Titan square in the eye. The beast was consumed by the blast, its body disintegrating in a massive explosion. As it died, it whispered its son's name one last time. Subaru took a steady step forward, his viewers erupting in disbelief that the attack had actually hit. System notifications confirmed his victory and the completion of the stage. He had leveled up 3 times, his stats receiving a significant boost. He had also earned 5,000 AP and obtained a new item, the Thunder's Heart. He looked at the glowing gem in his hand, wondering if this was it. The heart pulsed with light and a jolt of energy shot through him. His vision blurred as he found himself in a strange ethereal plane of purple light. A shadowy figure loomed over him, and he found he could neither speak nor move. A barrage of notifications appeared, each one stating that a mysterious entity was staring at him. He wondered if they were trying to tell him something. He clenched his fist around the Thunder's Heart and the vision shattered. He was back on the cliffside. A new message announced the start of the main scenario and instructed him to investigate the village using the Thunder's Heart. He had apparently blacked out and ended the livestream, much to his viewers' confusion. He wondered if he had just seen a cutscene. Pushing himself up, he apologized to the chat, explaining he had blacked out for a moment. His viewers joked about his 50 Shades of Fainting fetish, which was probably not far from the truth at this point. He then remembered he had credits to claim. His total shot up to 40,000, more than enough to upgrade his skill. He told his viewers he was too exhausted and would save the reward reveal for next time before ending the stream for good. Later, at a cafe, Uika congratulated him on his good work. He asked if the stream had been okay, and she assured him it was perfect. She excitedly told him he had peaked at over 3,000 viewers, a number he hadn't noticed. He apologized for being too focused on the trial, and she quickly clarified that she meant it as a compliment, internally marveling that his mask could be detached. She explained that for a news streamer, it was an incredible feat, and the timing of the stream ending had worked in his favor. She asked if he had done it on purpose, and he compared it to the cliffhanger of a drama. He explained he planned to check the rewards with his viewers during the next stream to ensure his reaction was genuine. Yuika smiled, realizing her boss had been worried for nothing. This rookie knew exactly what he was doing. She then told him she had a little present for him, something he wouldn't be able to refuse, her eyes glinting with a mischievous smile. With a suggestive smile, Uika told him to look up a streamer known as Hawkeyes. Subaru calmly agreed, pulling up the stream on his device. The streamer, Hawkeyes, was in the middle of a broadcast, hyping his audience up for his next topic. The title of his stream was provocative, suggesting that the new player might be the original Narukami. Subaru watched as Hawkeyes explained that during the pain endurance trial, Subaru had been undertaking a second, hidden challenge simultaneously. Yuika was left speechless by the streamer's accurate analysis. Hawkeyes declared there was no need to drag things out. He might as well be the real Narukami Subaru. The analyst insisted no further explanation was needed. Subaru turned to his manager, who asked if he felt the same way. She then shifted gears, asking him a strange question. She admitted it was rude, but she was intensely curious. Seated across from him, she asked why he streamed. She assumed it wasn't for money. Subaru paused for a moment, leaving her in anxious anticipation. He then stated plainly that it was in fact for the money. There was no other reason. Yuika was completely flustered, quickly backtracking and saying that money was of course important. Changing the subject, she brought up the present she had mentioned. She explained that Hawkeyes was part of Azure Sky and had a loyal fanbase for his commentary. As a result, the revenue from Hawkeye's streams about him would be split. Split with him, she clarified, since it was derivative content based on his gameplay. Subaru was pleasantly surprised, remarking that he'd only heard good news since joining the agency. His comment made Uika blush, and he called it a surprise bonus. As a small gesture, she suggested he collaborate with Hawkeyes. Later, back in his room, Subaru removed his mask. He wondered if he had been too harsh with his only for money line. Looking at his reflection, he felt that the more connections he made, the less he knew what he was supposed to hide. Shaking off the thought, he spent 40,000 credits to level up his Wedge of Greed skill. The next upgrade would cost a staggering 80,000 credits. His remaining balance was a paltry 120 credits. Money really was his top priority. Thankfully, he thought as he lay down, the collab in 2 days should bring in a decent amount. A system notification appeared, and he examined a crystalline blue flower, musing that people might hear news about him before he was ready. Meanwhile, Uika was at home, burying her face in a pillow. She replayed their conversation in her mind, but with a much more dramatic flair. She imagined him as a mysterious hero whose stylish mask hid a world-wrecking secret. He would warn her not to dig too deep, lest she get hurt. In her fantasy, she would scream that her curiosity was killing her, but she would respect his boundaries. She imagined him confessing that since meeting her, everything had been going great. She shrieked into her pillow, thinking he was even more charming in person, and punched it until feathers flew everywhere. The poor pillow never saw it coming. A man with a secret, she sighed dreamily. On floor 7, Nox Bella. A different scene was unfolding inside a grand moonlit building. A muscular man, Kurokawa Amon of the Blue Zone Guild, was working out while watching Hawkeye's stream. The streamer's words replayed, and Amon grunted that he didn't like the guy. The way he talked pissed him off. His subordinate informed him that Hawkeye's was a popular streamer with around 8,000 viewers. Amon scoffed, saying he used to stream too. The subordinate advised him to forget Hawkeye's and focus on the subject of the stream, Narukami Subaru. Amon watched the clip of Subaru destroying the Titan King and admitted it was impressive. He then recalled a quote from Sako Shuhei, the Spear Knight of Blue Eyes, about keeping one's eyes on the target. His subordinate was shocked he remembered such a minor detail. Amon explained that he had studied every member of Blue Eyes as they were all players at the pinnacle of the tower. He added that the official story of their deaths never added up. The stream continued, and Amon grew more annoyed with Hawkeye's familiar tone, complaining that streamers would toss pride aside for good content. He shut the broadcast off and irritably asked why he was being shown this. His subordinate explained that Guildmaster Kyojo Itsuki had ordered it. The man continued, stating that lightning was Blue Eye's symbol and Blue Zone was its successor. They had received intel that this new streamer was obsessed with money. With a flourish, a cart was wheeled in and uncovered, revealing stacks upon stacks of gleaming gold bars. The budget was secured. The subordinate declared Itsuki had ordered them to bring Subaru in, no matter the cost. Amon was stunned silent, wondering if this guy was truly that much of a moneymonger. The Floor 2 trial commenced in the aftermath of the Titan attack. Peleus was in the middle of organizing the recovery efforts, ordering the injured to be gathered and prioritized. The young knight looked weary but determined. His expression shifted to one of pure relief when he saw Subaru was finally awake. He rushed over, expressing how worried they had all been when Subaru collapsed. Subaru, still a bit dizzy, said it had only been a day. He asked if they could talk later at the inn, and Peleus eagerly agreed. As the knight hurried off to continue his duties, Subaru mused that Peleus was an earnest man. Back in his room, Subaru decided to check his rewards first. He received the Thunder's Heart, a unique growth-type item that boosted both thunder resistance and attack power. He was stunned. Its stats were perfect for a thunder user. This was an insane drop. Just then, a knock came at the door. He called for them to come in, and an armored hand appeared holding a fruit basket. It was, of course, Peleus, who cheerfully asked if he had rested well, apparently believing that a fruit basket solves all post-battle exhaustion. They sat down to talk. Subaru confirmed that the legend Peleus had spoken of was true. The knight was ecstatic, exclaiming that Subaru had saved the village. Subaru then pulled a gem from his pocket, explaining that it was the Thunder's Heart and had come from the Titan's body. He asked if Peleus knew what it was. The knight's eyes widened, but he claimed to have no clue. A denial so unconvincing Subaru almost rolled his eyes. Peleus quickly apologized, admitting he had only heard of it in legends. He explained that he knew two such stories. The first was that thunder was used to wipe out the Titans, much like Subaru himself had just done. The second was a far older legend about a war between gods and Titans fighting over the power of thunder itself. Intrigued, Subaru asked him to continue. Peleus explained that in this legend among legends, the Titans lost the war. Peleus speculated that the gem was likely crafted by someone. Subaru wondered who would make such a thing, but the knight said that part wasn't in the legends. Its purpose, however, seemed obvious: to let humans wield thunder. They needed it because of gods and Titans, being so powerful that humans couldn't compare. The gem was a weapon, made so that humanity could fight back and win. Suddenly, system notifications flooded Subaru's vision. He had viewed all chapters of The Forgotten Human, officially clearing the Thunder trial. With the AP he had earned, his Thunder skill instantly leveled up to 3. His body began to glow and dematerialize. Peleus jumped to his feet in a panic, shouting and asking what was happening, but Subaru was already gone. He reappeared in a massive city, materializing in a flash of golden light in a town square. He had arrived on floor 3, Ordinarl. Nearby players glanced over, dismissing him as just another Narukami cosplayer and wondering when the trend would finally die. A donation of 1,000 credits popped up from a fan, congratulating him and asking how he felt. This, he thought, was it. A memory surfaced. A man being approached by a woman named Reina, who was initially standoffish. She had shyly explained she was separated from her party and asked if he had seen someone very tall. He had thought about it, then confirmed he had, pointing her in the right direction. She had run off, only to stop, and gesture confusedly. He had decided to go with her, since he was heading that way anyway. She was thrilled. He had simply showed her the way. After she introduced herself as Kyoka Reina, he had given his name Narukami Subaru. He wondered if things had gone differently that day. Would everyone still be alive now? Another donation appeared, this one for 100 credits, again asking how he felt. Snap back to the present, he answered the stream, stating that he felt as if he had lost something important. He put his device away and announced that his next stream would be a collaboration with Hawkeyes before abruptly ending the livestream. In an elegant, high-ceilinged restaurant, a man sat down, apologizing for the wait, and explained that Wikia was on her way, noting that travel between floors was not instantaneous. He introduced himself as John Tail from Azure Sky Entertainment. Subaru recalled Yuika's description of her, nagging boss, but politely shook the man's hand, claiming his manager had told him about him. John explained that he wanted to meet in person because he was curious. Yuika had only ever praised two players with such fervor. When Subaru questioned this, John named the first, the legendary Narukami Subaru of Blue Eyes. He admitted his own shock that Ui Ikea, a harsh critic, had taken such an interest in a new player with the same name, thinking she was just being a simp. Subaru laughed off the coincidence before asking if John was interested in the old guild. The question was sharp, and Subaru's gaze intensified. John noted his reaction, confirming Subaru wasn't indifferent, and asked why he brought it up now. This, John said, was one of the reasons he wanted to meet. He presented a device showing the prize for an upcoming tournament on floor 3, a pair of boots. Subaru's breath caught in his throat. A faint golden energy crackled around his clenched fist. Elsewhere, a woman with dark hair noted that Subaru's stream had ended. It was over. Wondering if her companion was also finished, she set off, her heeled boots crunching on the frosted ground. As she moved through a snowy forest, she walked down a lonely path until she found a man with long white hair staring into the distance. She asked if he was done yet. He replied that he had been done for a long time. He was just thinking. He had been contemplating the fate of their frozen enemies, debating whether to kill them or let them live. The woman urged him to just kill them, but he was hesitant, unsure if they were truly sent by Kyojo. He reasoned that their enemy wouldn't send such small fries for a serious mission. She countered that letting them go was a risk, as they could lead their pursuers back to their hideout. Deciding for herself, she summoned dozens of ice daggers from the ground. They hovered in the air around her, a deadly swarm at her command. With a flick of her wrist, the blades shot forward. The man yelled for her to stop, but it was too late. The ice daggers tore through the frozen figures, shattering them into pieces. He angrily demanded to know what she was doing. She retorted that if they had let them go, their survival would no longer be a secret. She told him his indecisiveness would get them killed and that he needed to harden his heart. He fell silent, then apologized, admitting she was right. After a moment, he held out his own device, telling her to look. She snatched it from him and her eyes widened in fury. He asked if it pissed her off, and she spat that it obviously did. The screen showed a pair of familiar boots, Tashia's shoes. He confirmed her suspicion. It was bait. A trap to lure any survivors out of hiding. She immediately declared they had to take back what was theirs. He agreed, but pointed out that he was terrible at sneaking, while she had always excelled at it. Annoyed, she told him she had already decided to go, regardless of his input. He grabbed her arm to stop her, cautioning her not to charge in blindly. The safest plan, he insisted, was to steal the relic the moment the winner was announced. Back in the restaurant, John Tail revealed the prize was Teleria, a relic of Blue Eyes, put up by Blue Zone for the tournament. He asked if Subaru was interested. Very much so, Subaru confirmed, his voice low and intense. John was pleased, explaining that their entire project depended on his willingness to participate. He elaborated that since Subaru was already using the famous name, creating a storyline where he hunted for Blue Eyes relics would be a killer attraction for his stream. Rage, cold, and absolute washed over Subaru. He seethed at the thought of them using Toshia's relic, his friend's legacy, as a cheap circus prop. John noticed the sudden tension and asked if something was the matter. Reining in his fury, Subaru agreed to do it. John was ecstatic. Subaru stood to leave, and John called after him, saying they would all be cheering him on from behind the screen. As
Lying
he
in his
walked
room,
away,
Subaru contemplated the
made a
upcoming
silent
tournament,
vow, wondering
he
what
would
events
not
it would
let them
feature.
have it.
He hoped
Not
for individual
over his dead
matches, though he knew he couldn't afford to be picky. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Uika. He sat up quickly, his mask resting on the bedside table. With a sharp glance, he opened the door to find her standing there in a striking red dress. She seemed momentarily flustered. He invited her in, which seemed to shock her even more. He offered to talk in the hallway if she preferred, but she quickly accepted his invitation, announcing her intrusion. They sat across from each other in the sparsely decorated room, and she took a moment to look around, noting how plain it was. She seemed nervous just being there. As he observed her, Subaru noted her bottomless mana reserve, confirming his suspicion that she was no ordinary manager. Noticing his stare, she asked if something was wrong. He broke the silence, asking for the tournament information she had promised. Snapping out of her daze, she apologized and explained that the tournament was a battle royale. The prize was the relic boots, Teleria, and the format was a simple free-for-all. He confirmed it was a solo match, and she agreed. The stage was a simulated trial field, open to any Floor 3 player with a 3,000 credit entry fee and no player cap. Subaru said he would send data from past battle royales to her kit for her to review. She looked at the files he sent, realizing with a jolt that they were all about him and his past victories. He thanked her for the help, and she insisted she was just doing her job. She then mentioned that their chief had received a message from Blue Zone. The name of his betrayer, Kyojo Itsuki, echoed in his mind, and a surge of rage coursed through him. Uika explained that since Blue Zone couldn't contact him directly, they had emailed their office to request a meeting. She assumed they would try to poach him with a better offer, but he simply told her to ignore them. She was stunned that he would so casually dismiss an offer from the top guild. He stated firmly that he had no intention of joining Blue Zone or any other guild. Yuika erupted in celebration, overjoyed that she had made the right call in telling him. She told him to relax until the collab and left in high spirits. As the door closed, he mused that she was celebrating as if it were her own victory. For a regular employee to be so invested, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Later, at a massive futuristic arena, John Tail and Hawkeye stood waiting. John confirmed the day's project, a talent comparison test between the original Narukami and the new one. He praised Hawkeye's bold idea but warned him of the consequences of failure. Hawkeye's was unfazed, declaring that results were all that mattered, and this was how they would earn the viewer's trust. Besides, he asked with a smirk, had he ever lost a battle before? John reminded him not to get cocky, as it all depended on Subaru. Just then, Yuika arrived with Subaru and John greeted them. Hawkeye's eyes lit up. His chance to become a star was finally here. Subaru marveled at the scale of the rented arena as Hawkeye strode forward, introducing himself as his friendly streamer. Subaru returned the greeting, and Hawkeye's gushed about being a fan of the trending new player. John cut the pleasantries short, reminding them to save the bonding for the livestream. With that, Hawkeye started the broadcast. He kicked things off with his usual high-energy greeting, and the viewer count skyrocketed, quickly surpassing 12,000. He announced that he had brought the man everyone had been waiting for, and Subaru stepped into view. Hawkeyes introduced him, and Subaru gave a simple hello. When a viewer asked if he had seen Subaru's face, Hawkeyes admitted that even his manager hadn't, playfully asking if he was hiding something. Subaru smoothly denied it, joking that he was actually quite good-looking, which sent the chat into a donation frenzy. Hawkeyes was thrilled by the hype, and Subaru quipped that he wasn't going to lose, at least not in the looks department. The analyst was impressed. Subaru knew how to play to a crowd. Yuika and John watched, pleased with the showmanship. Hawkeyes cut the banter and moved on to the main event. The trial commenced and a blinding light filled the arena. A horde of combat androids materialized. Hawkeyes explained he chose this trial for two reasons. First, it was perfect for measuring control, a key skill for any top player. And second, it was his chance to prove his claim that the new Subaru was on par with the original, whose records were displayed on the main screen. A viewer challenged him, but Subaru confidently replied that if he didn't believe he could win, he wouldn't have agreed to the collab. The androids activated, their eyes glowing red, and swarmed him from all sides. The scoreboard loomed, displaying the legendary record. Narukami Subaru, 43 kills. The chat buzzed with excitement and doubt, but Subaru stood calmly, ready to face the challenge. A mission popped up from a viewer. Kill more than 43 androids for 10,000 credits, or show his face on camera if he failed. Subaru initially refused, but a flood of donations sweetened the deal, and he accepted, promising a face reveal upon failure. A viewer pointed out the unfairness of Subaru taking all the risk while splitting the reward, so Hawkeyes quickly announced that for this mission all credits would go directly to Subaru. With that settled, he grinned and held up a stopwatch. It was showtime. The 3-minute timer began. The androids swarmed him, but Subaru was ready. He activated his thunder skill, golden energy crackling around him as he moved. He dispatched the first android with a single electrified touch, his kill count ticking up to 1. Hawkeyes was ecstatic to be seeing the thunder skill in action live. Subaru drew his demon blade and became a whirlwind of motion, his speed astonishing the viewers. Stronger androids emerged from the horde, but they were no match for him. He moved with fluid grace, launching himself into the air and dispatching enemies mid-flight, a sight that reminded older viewers of the original Subaru's famed aerial combat, his attacks becoming a blur of black and gold energy that tore through the android ranks. With over a minute left, his kill count was already at 26. The onslaught was relentless and the viewers were captivated. Those who had bet against him were already eating their words. Hawkeyes watched, mesmerized. With only 13 seconds remaining, the kill count stood at 41. Subaru moved with incredible speed, dispatching another android to reach 42 kills. The final seconds ticked away. He locked eyes with his last target just as an android captain lunged at him. He dodged under its swing and delivered the final blow as the timer hit 1 second. The score updated, 42 kills. Then, just as the timer hit 0, another number flashed, 43 kills. The trial ended. Total kills, 43. Record updated. The scoreboard now showed a tie for first place. Hawkeyes was speechless, stammering that it was a draw. He threw an arm around Subaru, hyping the incredible result to the roaring chat. Donations poured in, including one from a user named Feetwiper Hawkeyes, much to the streamer's chagrin. One viewer asked if this was the real Subaru stream, but Hawkeyes clarified it was his own channel. Suddenly, a massive 10,000 credit donation appeared from a user named Reinhardt. The chat exploded with speculation. Hawkeyes was starstruck, thanking the high ranker for the donation and for watching. The name caught Subaru's attention, the one/swordsman. Another donation from Reinhardt came through, this time with a message expressing how Subaru's run had inspired him. Subaru was instantly suspicious, wondering why the man was watching and if he knew what had happened to his son, Isaac. Then came the final message from Reinhardt, an offer to collaborate. Subaru paused, reading the request. Hawkeyes, John, and Uika were practically vibrating with excitement, making big O shapes with their arms in the background, like a K-pop group's biggest fans. They were a little too into it. To their utter shock, Subaru declined, stating he needed to focus on the trials for now. Claiming he had used too much energy, he asked Hawkeyes to wrap up the stream and walked off, leaving the streamer sputtering in his wake. John and Uika rushed over, demanding to know why he had turned down such a massive opportunity. John explained that collabs with high rankers were almost unheard of. Subaru was dismissive, saying that if being a ranker was so important, he would just become one himself. He left them stunned and silent. Hawkeyes caught up to him, praising his performance before asking a serious question. He had noticed that Subaru seemed off during the fight, as if he wasn't in top condition. So, he had noticed. Subaru admitted to himself that the analyst lived up to his name. He then explained his strategy. The highlight of the stream was the rivalry, the question of whether he could surpass the original. A decisive win would have given him a temporary boost, but it would have killed the long-term hype. A loss would have led to viewers dismissing him entirely. Therefore, a draw was the only acceptable outcome. It was the only way to keep the story going. John asked if that meant he could have won if he wanted to. Who knows, Subaru replied enigmatically. He added that the result was set and now it was all up to interpretation, before walking away, leaving the others to ponder his words. In an opulent chamber, a fist slammed down with furious force, shattering a heavy wooden table. Rank 121 Guildmaster Reinhardt of the Golden Lion Guild seethed, his face contorted with rage at the insolent brat who had just rejected him. A notification confirmed the livestream had ended. A nervous subordinate entered the ruined room, timidly asking if something was the matter. Reinhardt's anger was palpable as he explained that the streamer, Narukami Subaru, had turned down his collaboration offer. The underling noted the audacity of the rejection, while Reinhardt fumed that his plan to publicly crush the rookie was now ruined. It wasn't the wasted credits that angered him, but the sheer nerve of a nobody scratching his pride. The subordinate handed him his kit, and Reinhardt's attention shifted. He inquired about the search for his son, Isaac. The man hesitated, suggesting that it wasn't unusual for a young man to disappear for a few days. This was the wrong thing to say. A surge of red energy erupted as Reinhardt grabbed the man by his throat, lifting him effortlessly into the air. He accused his subordinate of mocking him as well, the man choking in terror. With a flick of his wrist, Reinhardt hurled him across the room, where he crashed into the far wall. Looming over the crumpled figure, Reinhardt coldly questioned when he had been given permission to nitpick his orders. The man immediately prostrated himself, begging for forgiveness and promising to resume the search at once. Elsewhere, Yuika's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, seeing the caller ID, Nagging Boss. She answered with a tired hello. Her boss, John Tail, immediately erupted, demanding to know where her energy was and why she couldn't speak to him with the same excitement she had for Narukami. She thought to herself that the man needed a new hobby, like competitive napping. The call continued, with John pressing her about the Reinhardt collaboration, a chance they couldn't afford to lose. Uika sighed, explaining there was little she could do. Narukami Subaru was more focused on climbing the tower than on collabs, a mindset John grudgingly admitted was correct for a player, though he still grumbled about her attitude. Uika simply hung up on him. Despite her confident words, she knew the collaboration was a massive opportunity. Deciding to give it one more try, she knocked on Subaru's door. When he opened it, she was momentarily flustered. He was wearing his mask, and she asked if he always kept it on. He confirmed that, for now, it made him feel more at ease. He then teased her, asking if she was also curious about his real face. She frantically denied it, quickly adding that while the mask was good for his brand, she hoped he would one day show his own face. Subaru's tone turned serious as he asked why everyone was so obsessed with his name. Uika considered it, listing his underdog status and natural coolness as factors, but then revealed the most important reason. Narukami Subaru was their hope. Confused, Subaru asked what she meant. She explained that he probably didn't know, but when she first came to the tower, it was a desolate wasteland. Stability was a fantasy, and the only way to survive was to keep climbing. With every floor cleared came credits and a chance to settle down, and slowly, people began to believe they could conquer this world, that it was a world they could win in. And the one who stood above them all was Narukami Subaru. He was the first to prove it was possible. Subaru quietly asked if that was what she believed as well. Uika leaned in close, playfully calling it a secret, just like the face behind his mask, and teased that maybe she'd tell him someday. Realizing she had gotten sidetracked, she apologized, but Subaru invited her inside to talk. The simple offer sent her into a panic, and she made a hasty exit, wishing him good night. Walking away, she chastised herself for getting so flustered, wondering why his invitations always made her heart jump. Alone, Subaru contemplated her word, hope. He soon found himself in the digital antechamber for the next trial, where messages of support and donations flooded his screen. The hype from the Reinhardt incident was wild, with large credit donations pouring in from established guilds like Golden Lion and Yggdrasil. It was simple, he thought. He gave people what they wanted, and they paid him for it. He then commenced the Floor 3 trial. He was faced with a choice between two warring factions, Ottoman and Conrad. He chose Conrad, the faction that only 3% of players ever picked, and for good reason. He materialized in a rowdy mercenary rest area. As he walked through the tavern, a burly man with a nasty grin spotted the newbie, deciding he was the perfect cure for his boredom. The man swaggered towards Subaru and intentionally slammed his shoulder into him. To his surprise, Subaru didn't move an inch. The man grunted, impressed by the rookie's strength, and tried to save face by telling him to watch where he was going. Subaru turned slowly, calmly stating that the man was the one with the problem, as he had initiated the contact on purpose. Enraged at being called out, the B-ranker grabbed the E-rank merc by the collar. The other mercenaries took notice, casually remarking that Vulture was picking on another newbie. Subaru, however, saw it as a great opportunity to test something. A faint crackle of thunder surrounded his leg. In a blur of motion, his foot connected with Vulture's chin, sending the bully flying backward across the room. The man landed in an unconscious heap, leaving the tavern in stunned silence. One mercenary wondered aloud if Vulture was sick, but another dryly pointed out that sick people don't launch themselves across a room. Realizing what had happened, the crowd turned hostile, vowing that the tavern would be the newbie's grave. Subaru's eyes narrowed behind his mask, ready for them. Moments later, the floor was littered with groaning bodies, one man whispering that their opponent wasn't human. A well-dressed man with a neat mustache approached him through the carnage, complimenting his skill. He extended a hand, introducing himself as Raymond, a rank examiner. The young man possessed some skill, and the rank examiner, Raymond, was impressed. He shook Subaru's hand, noting he was a new face and asking what jobs he had cleared. Subaru explained that, as an E-rank, his options were limited. The trial for Floor 3 required players to earn 10,000 achievement points. However, E-rank jobs offered a paltry 50 points at best, meaning most players were stuck on this floor for over a year. Subaru didn't have that kind of time, so he needed a shortcut. Raymond stroked his mustache, deducing that Subaru was an otherworlder, a rare sight these days. He insisted that even so, he couldn't offer special treatment. Subaru countered, stating there was always a way to shorten the proper order of things. There was one way to clear the trial at once, and he would make Raymond's dreams come true. He would conquer the Cave of Thunder and make it Conrad's. The examiner was stunned. He exclaimed that the cave was a job for A-rank mercenaries, a notorious dungeon that only a fool would challenge. Subaru knew this well. It was an impregnable fortress over which the two kingdoms had fought for decades. The special dungeon had never been cleared in recorded history. It lay in a mountain range separating the kingdoms, and conquering it meant gaining a massive strategic advantage. All he needed was proof of A-rank status to accept the quest, and he promised not to abuse it. Raymond considered the offer, aware that refusing the dangerous-looking man before him could get messy. The stream's chat lit up, with one viewer commenting that Raymond was about to find out why you don't bring a mustache to a lightning fight. After a tense moment, Raymond relented, agreeing to write a letter of recommendation for the raid party. Raid parties, he reasoned, always needed more manpower. He told Subaru the party would depart in 5 days and left to fetch the letter. As he waited, viewer missions flooded Subaru's screen, all daring him to clear the dungeon solo for massive credit rewards. He noted the timing. 5 days was precisely when the tournament ended. It seemed Bluezone had planned the schedule carefully. Raymond returned, still in disbelief. He confessed that he had challenged the cave in his youth and lost half his party. Subaru took the letter, assuring him that it wouldn't happen this time. When Raymond asked why he needed the letter then, Subaru calmly stated that he was going in alone. The examiner was floored, sputtering that it was a 2-0 by no-man raid. Subaru replied that he didn't have any companions, at least, not right now. From a precarious cliffside perch, a cloaked woman watched the stream on her device. She mused that the streamer was just like the real Subaru, planning to clear the impossible all by himself. When he announced he was taking a break from other trials in streaming, she let out an audible gasp of disappointment. The stream ended, and she laughed, delighted by how much he resembled their old leader. He always went his own way, no matter what anyone else said. It was like the real Subaru was live once again. Remembering the tournament, she decided she might stick around for a chat with him, though she certainly hoped he wouldn't win. Back in the city, Yuika greeted Subaru, praising his performance. She told him he had perfectly captured the original's vibe by taking on such a reckless challenge. Subaru credited her advice, admitting that taking normal jobs would have made for a boring stream. When asked about his next move, he explained his plan to hunt until the tournament to level up and test his new skills. He wanted to get a feel for the Thunder's heart and how much power he could wield with his current stats. He was determined that Toshiya's keepsake would not fall into anyone else's hands. Meanwhile, a Bluezone player named Ginzaki Naoro stormed through the streets furious. He couldn't believe some Floor 3 nobody was making him dance to their tune. He arrived at a tavern announcing his arrival. Inside, John Tail calmly waved him over from a table set with drinks. John confirmed Ginzaki's identity and his purpose for being there. Ginzaki sneered, asking where the guy who actually mattered was. John explained with a placid smile that Subaru was out on other business. The Bluezone player called it arrogant, but John dismissed the question as a private matter. More importantly, they had already conveyed Subaru's wishes, which was why he wasn't there. Ginzaki insisted on speaking with him directly, accusing John of preventing the meeting. He exploded with rage, shouting that they were just trying to protect their golden goose. He argued that Subaru would be better off joining a major guild. John countered that famous streamers earn just as much as top players these days. He had met players with a bias against streaming before. Ginzaki laughed, asking if John was trying to make an enemy of Bluezone. John's expression hardened. He explained that their company prioritizes their streamers' wishes above all else and would fully support Subaru's decision. Ginzaki smugly replied that John was out of touch with the world if he thought Bluezone would stay quiet. But John simply told him he was the one who didn't get it. Some people can't be swayed by force or threats. An almost suffocating aura of power radiated from John as he told the man to get lost. Ginzaki froze, stunned by the overwhelming mana. He stammered, unable to believe what he was hearing. John just waved a dismissive hand. Shaken, Ginzaki backed away, vowing they would regret this day. John merely smiled, utterly unfazed. "Ooh, how scary," he drawled.